Welcome to Manhwa Recaps, spoilers ahead, watch out, and take care. Huge shout out and special thanks to the channel members. The manhwa starts with a bunch of students being let out for winter vacation. We see they're all excited that they actually get to have a break from school. There's a student watching from afar, and he seems to have a different opinion. He wonders why they are so lively, saying a lot of them will be going to cram school tomorrow. He lets out a sigh, saying since he's taking the exam next year, the questions he'll have to deal with tomorrow are gonna be low-key AIDS, and that this is just the start of the rest of their lives. He finds it so boring. His phone starts to ring, and he answers, asking who it is. On the other end, it's a delivery man asking him if he's home right now. He goes to say to just leave it at the front door, but the delivery man says he needs to receive this personally. The man wonders what he ordered and asks if the delivery man could wait, seeing as he's on his way home. He spots the delivery man in front of his house and recognizes the symbol on the box in his hand. He's surprised and starts running straight towards it. The delivery man goes to ask him for his ID, and he hits him with a drive-by showing of the ID while taking the box. The delivery man sighs, saying after he saw the logo, "Bro pretended that he didn't even exist." He instantly runs inside, takes off his shoes, going straight to his room, slamming the door. He takes out a box cutter, opens it, and is super excited as we see a virtual reality headset and some bracelets. The manual explains exactly how to wear them, explaining that it is a headset and wristbands. The man quickly puts on the wristbands and the headset, and, following the manual, he turns on the power button, hearing a voice saying that it is analyzing the user's biological signals, telling him not to move. The voice thanks him, and we learn that his name is Lee Yushin, and it congratulates him on becoming a VIP tester. A girl appears in his face, jump scaring him, and he screams, asking her who the hell she is as he flails his arms. She says that if he's surprised by just this, he'll probably be even more surprised by what's to come. Then she snaps her fingers as his world starts to shift to that of a different planet, then again to the beach. He's left speechless, and the woman says that she's happy to present him with an unforgettable game called Log Korea. Then she realizes she forgot to give him an invitation, so she throws it directly at him. He's surprised, but manages to catch it, and as soon as he opens it, it starts to project a whole city in front of him. Yushin is amazed, and asks if this is all for real. Later that night at dinner, he's telling his parents that he became a private tester for a new game, and he got lucky that he got in. We see the food is still hot, and his father asks him if he's planning to become a tester or a tennis player, asking him how long he'll be there. Might be missing some context here. He says it'll be 15 days, and it's during his winter vacation, and he'll be paid by the hour. But his father says no. Yushin sits there blankly and tries to get his father to reconsider, but he slams his spoon onto the table, surprising both Yushin and his mother. His father says that even though he's a third-year high school student, and we learn he's gone through some metal training with the Marine Corps, he asks him where his achievements are, asking him if he's crazy for trying to become a game tester. He tries to get his mother on his side, but she turns her head as his father continues, asking him how many times he's told him that studying is the way to go, and that he shouldn't rush things. Yushin gets angry and slams his hands on the table, saying he's got it, and he won't do it. His father tries to tell him that he hasn't even eaten his food, and goes to tell him how important it is, but the mother grabs onto his collar, yelling at him to shut up, saying that he already said he won't go. She watches him walk away and realizes how sad he looks. Yushin says he can't believe he has to throw away this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He begins to grin while looking back at his parents, saying he doesn't actually plan to let it slip up, as he's got something cooking up. The next morning, on the day of the first test, he tells his parents that he'll go to the academy. Right after leaving the house, we see on his phone that he is going to Log Korea. On the train, he's calling his teacher, telling him that his family will be going on a trip throughout the remainder of the vacation. When his teacher asks where, he looks up at a sign above him that mentions Quebec, and he tells his teacher he's going to Canada. His teacher says that it's really strange he's going somewhere even colder for winter vacation. He realizes he might have made a mistake, but says at least with this, his boring academy problem is solved. Of course, he'll have to prepare for the day when his parents call the academy, but that's something the future him can worry about, as he's way too excited about this. He makes it to the Twin Towers and enters the first floor. He looks up at a giant screen that says Real Online, and he is glad that he's made it. Yushin stands there amazed, and a guard tells him that he can't be here without an invitation. Yushin shows him his bracelet. He keeps pointing at it, and we see him scanning it on the VIP section. When he enters, he sees a lot of games as well as strange-looking people in front of him. There are giants with hammers, and even other armored guys, amidst all of the normal citizens. He says this is amazing. He sees a bright light in front of him, which catches his attention as something starts to appear. He wonders what it is as he is greeted by a giant man with an eye patch. Yushin screams as the man glares at him. He then rears his axe back, swinging it down on Yushin. Yushin rolls out of the way and starts to scream as he turns behind him to see the man charging directly at him. Yushin screams, asking for some help, and starts to run into a holographic building. The eye patch man swings his axe, making the hologram disappear. As he starts to approach Yushin, Yushin begs him to stop. The man raises the axe into the air as Yushin screams to log out. We then see the woman from earlier say, "Stop." Yushin slowly opens his eyes as we see that the man stopped just shy of his face, and the woman approaches him, saying it looks overwhelming, but it is a low-level enemy named Blackwen, so he shouldn't be too scared. She jumps straight at the man and does some weird-ass kung fu shit while touching him, and then he disappears. Yushin is surprised and says that she must be the operator. She nods at him, and he wonders why her voice sounds so weird. She asks what's wrong with it and suggests that maybe it's too manly, as she turns into a man. He laughs, saying he's bad, and he should stop joking around, but his reactions have been so fun since the moment he logged in. Everybody else starts to laugh at Yushin, and rather than getting frustrated, he says, as expected, "This place is gas." The man introduces himself as Hyungyu, the general manager of the test, and says that his self-introduction was late because he was also late. Yushin apologizes and says that being removed for being late would be the worst-case scenario. Hyungyu tells him not to apologize, saying they should proceed with the scheduled demonstrations now. Yushin breathes a sigh of relief, and Hyungyu tells him to follow him, saying they should do the office tour and figure out presentations after the test. Due to the time constraints, it will be okay. Yushin says sure, since it's his fault for being late, and Hyungyu says that they should go straight to the test room. In the elevator, we see them having a good time, and there's a man watching them on the screen, saying that he's sure this is the only client he trusts, and he is the branch manager of the test named Bernadotte. He hangs up the phone, saying now if only the product that will be sold at a high price is prepared properly. He points a remote at the screen, saying he hopes Yushin can forgive them. As Yushin continues walking with Hyungyu, he is amazed by the area, saying this looks like something out of a game. They both get scanned, and Bernadotte says it's nothing but business as he lights up a cigar. After their scan, the door in front of them opens, and Yushin is even more amazed as he sees a bunch of capsules hanging around him. Yushin goes to ask about it, but Hyungyu says, before that, and points over toward the suit, saying Yushin needs to wait in the main room after changing into that suit, and he'll come by after he finishes checking the equipment. Yushin can't believe that he gets a suit and quickly takes off his clothes, donning it in an instant, and is super excited about it. He ain't rocking that shit, but in his mind, he thinks he is, as he says he's hella cool while pretending to swing a weapon down. He runs straight toward the main area, super excited, and is blinded by how bright it is on the inside. He covers his eyes and slowly opens them to see a blonde-haired woman in the same suit in front of him. He can't help but stare at her and begins to blush, saying it must be the same as last time. He runs over, saying that this operator is better than the last one, and says there's something special about this part. The woman asks what he means, and he starts to get real close to her, asking her how the fragrance of her shampoo was changed. He then hears Hyungyu on the speaker, saying that's probably because she just washed her hair, and we learn that her name is Maria. Yushin realizes that he almost just caught a case, and Maria asks if he heard, telling him to get that stupid expression off his face, or maybe she can cut off his nose for smelling her. He jumps back, screaming that he's sorry, and hits one of the capsules, falling into it. A voice then says, "User verification revitalization start." Yushin is surprised by how fancy it is, and Maria yells, calling out for Hyungyu, asking him what the hell is up with this stupid bastard. Yushin wonders why he caught a stray, and Hyungyu tells her not to worry, but due to a problem with their server, they had no choice but to merge the real online and simulator servers. She says she can't believe that bastard is a civilian, and they brought him in here, asking if they've gone crazy. He wonders why she keeps calling him a bastard, and Maria says if the superiors knew that he brought a civilian to the simulator, but Hyungyu cuts her off, saying he apologizes, but due to the last accident, if they don't merge them together, the simulator won't work either. While they're talking, Yushin begins to tap on some screen in front of him, wondering where the manual is for real online. But he can't see anything other than game start. Maria continues asking why she has to do this with him, saying she doesn't want to. Hyungyu says he understands, and starting today, she will no longer be able to access the simulator training. We see her making an annoyed face, and Yushin is surprised. Hyungyu asks if she would like to change her mind. Maria grits her teeth, grabbing onto her helmet, and puts it on, saying he better not try to avoid this later, and she'll make sure he's disciplined. Hyungyu thanks her for her generosity, and she gives him the finger, then puts on her helmet, lying down in the capsule. Hyungyu tells Yushin he'll figure out the controls as he plays the game, and to please get ready. Yushin puts on the helmet and lies down, and Hyungyu yells, saying he's operating the server. We see a whole NASA-like group getting everything ready as their capsules begin to light up. They start to yell their orders, such as Terra injection and checking assimilation rates. We see that the capsule is starting to turn orange as it gets very hot. Yushin asks why the hell it's so warm, and Hyungyu says that the energy produced during the exchange between the program and the body will soon disappear. They start to say that the assimilation rate has exceeded 70%, then 80%, then 90%, and finally, they have reached 100% as it's ready. Hyungyu yells, telling them to start it, and they give a countdown. Yeah, this shit straight NASA. As both Yushin and Maria look like they've fallen asleep, Hyungyu says the real simulator should be activated, as we see them both glitching out and teleporting somewhere else. Hyungyu says he hopes they enjoy their trip. Yushin starts to hear something odd, wondering what this is. Rather, he's feeling something on his face that he finds familiar. We hear a water droplet, and he says that he's sure of what it is now, as he opens his eyes to rain. He says this heavy rain is extremely vivid, and that it's also really cold. He starts to shiver, saying he was sure that he was lying inside of the capsule, but now he's so cold. In addition, he's also strapped in armor, even a cape. He says that must mean one thing, and that he is sure where he is standing right now must take place inside of a game. He's at some kind of castle, and a man yells, calling out to him, saying, "General, the enemy troops have reached the plains." Yushin asks what he means, saying that he thought he'd be put in a tutorial. An older man then calls out to him, calling him general as well, saying that waiting aimlessly will cause unrest among their soldiers, and that he needs to please hurry and give them orders. Yushin's still confused about the general thing, as there is a whole army in front of him, and he says that he guesses the armor he's wearing must be quite unique. He smiles, saying it makes sense, as it was for a commander-type character. He asks the man what he means by the plains, saying that the only thing surrounding the castle is the sea. The old man says that even God would wish for that to just be the ocean. Yushin's confused, saying, if that's not the sea, then what the hell is it? As he looks closer, he starts to understand that it's not the sea, but rather a marching army. There are so many men, and they are covering every inch of the ground, so it looks like an ocean. Spearmen in the front, archers in the back, and even some berserker-type units. Yushin asks if numbers like that are even meant to make sense. The old man yells, saying that the general shouldn't be overwhelmed. Even though this will be difficult, he needs to hurry and give them orders and lead them. Yushin's surprised, saying that he's already flustered, and wonders why he's yelling at an NPC. He tries to open status windows, saying there should be a console box, wondering where the interface is. The enemy troops start to get closer and closer to the castle, and the man yells, saying that the enemies are already on the offensive line. The old man realizes they need to act fast and yells at Yushin once more. Yushin says that he doesn't have the game manual, so he's not sure what to do. The old man looks annoyed and says that they can't sit back and let the enemy attack first, yelling for everyone to get into battle formation. He tells the archers to get ready, as they need to fight until their last breaths. The men give out a battle cry, except for Yushin, who stands there dumbfounded. The old man tells the archers to fire, and they release their arrows, soaring off the castle wall through the sky straight toward the army, just like the rain that is falling upon them all. The enemies start eating the arrows, causing their front line to fall apart, but this only gives the enemy archers a chance to fire their own arrows, as we see their troops drawing back their bows. If Yushin's army's arrows look like rain, it's nothing compared to the enemies, as their arrows truly blot out the sky, making it appear as if there is a tsunami in the air. The old man's eyes fill with fear, and he yells, telling everyone to put their shields up. The front line does exactly that, shielding themselves and the allies behind them. The arrows soar past them, flying into the buildings behind them, as well as some of the troops who were not fast enough to put their shields up. Their already small force is now getting even smaller. We hear a man let out a primal war cry as the enemy front line begins to advance toward the castle wall. As the enemy soldiers approach the castle gates, they prepare their siege ladders with men atop them, with ropes wrapped around their arms. As they get closer, the men with the ladders jump forward, breaching the castle wall. They make it right before the top, using the ladder to balance themselves, as they push off once more for the final burst to get over the wall. But they are all surprised as they are met with giant rocks being thrown from above, which plummet them straight down, turning them into meat crayons. The old man yells, saying they can't let a single one in, and must stop them here. More soldiers raise rocks into the air while archers fire their shots to delay the enemy soldiers' advance. For the sides that don't have range, they hold their spears above the wall and impale them down into soldiers. We see a man impale one soldier in the chest. The soldier grabs onto the spear, not falling back, as his comrade puts his hand on his shoulder as if to say good job, and uses him as a stepping stool to get over the wall, allowing them to breach the castle on this side. They attack Yushin's soldiers. One of the men falls to the floor, bleeding out. We see the life leave his eyes as Yushin watches it all, wondering if this is truly a game. All these sensations are too real, and he can't tell if it's real or not. As he debates this, standing there as the rain pelts him, he says that if this isn't real, then it's something eerily close to the real deal, as he can't even put it into words. Everything feels so vivid and surreal. The enemy archers begin to draw their bows back for yet another volley of arrows. Only one releases this time. As it soars over the enemy's castle wall, Yushin still stands there, dumbfounded by the whole situation. We see blood as the arrow grazes his face, impaling a soldier behind him. In shock, he sits there for a moment to process, then begins to scream as blood runs down his face. He says this is just a game, yet it hurts, and he wonders how that's possible. He can't even distinguish if this excruciating pain is real or not. The old man in front of him realizes he is in a panic, asking his men what they are doing, and tells them to protect the general. They charge forward as the rest of the arrows are released, and the volley flies directly toward Yushin. He looks up, but is too panicked to even speak, so he screams. The soldiers put up their shields to form a wall around Yushin, blocking the arrows. He sits there panting, hiding underneath their shields, saying this must be some kind of game error, and he can't even find the control window. His heart starts to beat extremely fast as he begins to think that he is genuinely stuck inside of the game. An orange-haired man asks the soldiers what they are doing, saying that the enemy archers have already stopped shooting, and they need to get back into formation. They quickly leave Yushin sitting there, with his hands on his head, completely distraught. Somebody's arm stretches out to him, and they pick him up as we see the old man asking how long he is planning to be like this, and why he isn't giving orders in this situation. Yushin wonders what he means, then imagines himself hitting the escape button, saying that this must work. He starts to cry, begging for the game to log him out, as he doesn't want to spend another minute in this nightmare of a game. The old man is still genuinely confused, asking what the hell he's talking about. As Yushin begins to disassociate, he looks over the castle wall, and past the army of enemies, and a man says, "This is so boring." He says, thinking about his old friendship with Yushin's father, he will go first, and he calls Yushin by his full name. He starts to spin, swinging his axe while carrying momentum, creating a whole lot of pressure as he spins around in a circle. As if he's doing a hammer throw in the Olympics, he creates his own little tornado, then yeets the axe out of his hands. It flies toward the castle wall, completely obliterating the front line and the secondary soldiers behind it, turning them into red mist. Bro definitely caught some friendlies. But it doesn't stop there, as it effortlessly mows down every soldier that tries to stop it. It finally calms down as it impales itself into the ground. Yushin and the old man sit there in fear, as the front line of the castle has now been destroyed by a single man's attack. The allied soldiers' heads fall off the top of the castle, but that's just the start for the enemy commander. He begins using the heads as stepping stools, bouncing off them one by one through the air, soaring straight toward Yushin. He grabs his axe again as the allied soldiers sit in disbelief. We see him above them as he readies it. Yushin says he's sure he's seen this silhouette before, as it looks familiar. As the axe swings down, Yushin remembers, saying, "It's Blackwen." This is the man he saw when he entered the building. Blackwen's axe swings down into the troops, sending them flying, while others are unlucky enough to get cut into pieces. They begin to turn and scramble in an escape attempt, but the old man tells them to hold their places, saying if they fall back, they'll be wiped out. Blackwen bounces off heads once more, charging straight toward them, raising his axe for a follow-up attack. The old man watches in horror as Blackwen brings his axe straight down, shattering everything in front of him. He asks if they really thought they could avoid it solely by being prepared, reminding them who he is and how many leagues above them he is. As he slowly but surely marches forward, as none of the soldiers can even fight back against him, he is playing Fruit Ninja with Yushin's army, cutting them down one by one. Treating them as nothing more than bugs beneath his feet, it's a straight massacre. Among the heads flying through the air, we see the old man's as their body parts hit the ground. Yushin stands there, too riddled with fear to move. Blackwen asks what he's doing, asking if he's just going to hide behind this pile of slaughtered bodies. He says surely Yushin knows his father was weaker than him, reminding Yushin how his father was so heated that he ended up being burned by him. Blackwen then draws a sword out, and we see Yushin's reflection, as he says that seeing Yushin's father like that was unsightly. Yushin doesn't even try to avoid the attack, wondering if dying like this will finally end the game. Blackwen then asks him why he doesn't pick up that sword. Yushin is confused as he looks over, wondering why he's not dead. Then, he looks down to see the sword impaled into the ground beside him. Close call. Blackwen says to slash a kid who isn't even holding a weapon is a disgrace to him, and at least until Yushin dies, he should die like he inherited his father's blood. Yushin looks up at him and wonders what the hell's wrong with him. He grabs onto the blade, using it to stand up, asking what Blackwen even knows about his father to be able to say things like that. He says if Blackwen is a villain in this game, he just needs to kill him, and that he should stop pretending like he knows his father. As he gets into a stance, readying his sword, Yushin wonders where this random burst of anger came from, saying that maybe it's because of this, but he's not scared for the first time since he came here. The person in front of him has destroyed the entire army with just a few attacks, and Yushin knows he is a monster, but he isn't afraid. Blackwen laughs, saying, "That's how it should be," and says that Yushin's expression will make this taste pleasant. Yushin realizes Blackwen is coming, saying that since it has come to this, he'll fight him as he wants, and that he's not scared of him anymore. As Blackwen comes in for the attack, Yushin yells, going in for a swing, but realizes that he has lost grip on the sword, as it was much heavier than he anticipated. The sword falls into the ground behind him. We see Yushin's body get cut, and Blackwen says that he is no different than a clown without makeup, killing Yushin by slicing him in half. Hyeongyu's voice echoes, saying that it's over. We then see Yushin's lifeless corpse lying on the ground, as they were watching from the screen. The men tell Hyeongyu that Yushin lasted 6 minutes. Hyeongyu asks about the assimilation rate. As they zoom in on the capsule, Yushin is shaking violently inside, and they say the assimilation rate is exactly 100%. He must be feeling an intense death-like pain. Hyeongyu smiles, saying that becoming a vegetable is enough for tonight, and that they need to prepare and upload the recorded video, so report it to Bernadotte, and then continue by restarting the system immediately. It cuts to Yushin's mother asking him why he's not sitting down, saying that she's made his favorite soybean paste stew, and asks if he's going to go to the academy without eating first. His father then asks if he's out of his mind, and if he played games all night again. His mother says not to nag him before he eats, and Yushin just sits there, wondering if maybe he's back to reality. He pulls up the chair, saying, "This is the one I always sit in," and that the smell is something he has missed. He says, "This is definitely her soybean paste stew." His father says, "Surely, you can tell the difference because your mother's tastes like straight ass." Yushin is still just wondering if this means he's back to his daily life. A water droplet hits his spoon as it starts to pour down, and his parents yell, saying that the water is leaking from upstairs. Yushin looks up, saying, "No way," as we see that there is an open sky instead of the roof. The color of the sky changes, and he says this is not right. He wonders if it's an illusion or a dream, but in reality, he's shaking violently in the capsule. He yells once more, saying, "There's no way that I am back in this place." He hears a soldier getting stabbed, and as he turns, worried, he realizes he is again in this hellish reality. He can't believe he was dragged into this. Out of frustration, he hits the ground, saying that this can't be happening, and he refuses to do this. Arrows begin to fly in as the enemies unleash a volley. A woman then yells, telling Yushin to look above. He turns, only to watch the arrows start pouring down on him. The woman charges forward, slicing down the arrows with her heavy axe. She misses one of the arrows, and it flies straight in, bouncing off her helmet, but it has enough power behind it to knock her helmet off. Yushin is surprised as her long hair falls out of the helmet, and he can see that she is quite pretty. The woman stares back at Yushin, who is still in disbelief, and he asks her where she came from, but he can clearly see that she is around the same age as him. We see her staring at him, and some kind of emotion swells up inside of her. He asks if she has something to say, but then realizes there's something more important. Blackwen will be coming here again to clean them all up. A shiver runs down his spine, but he realizes what he must do. Yushin tells Hyung-yu to listen, saying that he needs to stop this game immediately, as he does not want to do this anymore, and he needs to be let out. The old man tells him to calm down and give orders, as he's making the soldiers anxious. He reminds Yushin who his father is, saying that since he is his son, he will surely defeat Blackwen, asking him if he is wrong. All of the other soldiers start to raise their weapons and scream to hype him up, but Yushin yells at them to stop with the nonsense, asking if they really think an ordinary high school student is meant to fight that monster. He says he's not even their general, and he'd rather exit this hellish game. All the soldiers are shocked as the girl from earlier walks forward. She puts her hand on his shoulder, asking him if this really looks like a game to him, and she tells him right now, this is not a game, this is reality. If they want to survive, they need to fight. As she says this, Blackwen is right behind her. Yushin makes eye contact with him, seeing Blackwen grinning, and he screams no. But it's too late. Everyone is butchered helplessly in front of him. We cut to someone cutting a steak. It's none other than Bernadotte, saying it's just a matter of time before they return to New York, and it's all thanks to Hyung-yu. Hyung-yu says he is flattered as Yushin's scenery is seen behind them. Bernadotte says there's only one thing left to do, they need to deal with Maria. Hyung-yu says they will, and they're waiting for her to fall asleep, as she's still lying in her capsule. Meanwhile, Yushin is shaking violently. Hyung-yu says the simulator will end as soon as Yushin loses all motivation. Bernadotte asks what's the plan if Maria wakes up, asking if it's impossible to operate both at the same time. Hyung-yu says that if the simulator malfunctioned, it's definitely possible, but they shouldn't let this small possibility ruin the ending. Bernadotte, amused, saying if he's talking about small possibilities and raises his knife, saying, for example, it would be like the high schooler having the possibility of defeating Blackwen. As we see Yushin being thrown a sword again, Hyung-yu says he understands. Yushin then yells out to Hyung-yu, asking if he can see him, knowing he's being monitored. He begs Hyung-yu to at least raise his sword skills or basic stats if he's not going to move him out. He continues to scream Hyung-yu's name. Bernadotte looks pleased, and Hyung-yu says the possibility of Yushin actually winning is zero, so he shouldn't even consider it. Yushin lets out a primal scream, as he is yet again struck down by another attack from Blackwen. This time, just the impact causes his bones to break very loudly, causing Yushin to feel an intense pain. Hyung-yu remarks that Bernadotte surely already knew about the kind of immortality Blackwen possesses. Even if his DNA sequence is broken down, the fact that Blackwen exists as a catastrophe will not change. While Hyung-yu is saying all this, Blackwen throws Yushin over the edge toward his troops so they can finish the job. Bernadotte says that's right, it was a needless worry, and they should just eat their food instead. Hyung-yu smiles while bringing his food to his mouth. Another round starts, and Yushin wonders what's going on and how many times this has been. As he looks down at the sword, he reflects that he's faced death countless times. He sees one of his past selves, vomiting on the ground, overwhelmed by fear. In another attempt, he put his hands together, begging for his life, apologizing for everything. There was even a time when he was in denial, asking why it had to be him. He's done so many unsightly and cowardly things throughout his multiple attempts, constantly trying, somehow, to escape his destined fate of dying. With pure desperation, each and every attempt has been a failure. With the hope of some different outcome, they were all futile efforts. As, despite all of that, he had to keep meeting Blackwen. Yushin sits there, staring at them all, as Blackwen says that his father was not like this, he was much more hot-headed. In every single life so far, at some point, Yushin has gotten angry and charged directly at Blackwen, only to meet defeat. He has lost count of how many times he's been murdered. At this point, it feels like he's been here for years, but he has made zero progress in advancing forward. Blackwen says he's disappointed, adding that Yushin's dad was nothing like this. Yushin, now angry, asks what Blackwen even knows. He recalls the woman telling him that this is reality, and he laughs bitterly, saying that's such a bad joke. His reality was hanging out with his friends after school and eating dinner with his family. He grabs the blade yet again, fueled by anger, and screams as he swings it toward Blackwen. To his surprise, the blade shatters, but he actually manages to land a hit. Blackwen slaps the piss out of him, knocking him to the ground, and says that talking about his father seems to have made Yushin more hot-headed just like him. Yushin begins to laugh, saying that now he understands, warning him that he needs to take heed of his words. As he refuses to be afraid of him anymore. No matter how many times Blackwen gouges his eyes out or rips his body to pieces, he will not avoid him. Yushin says that he will abuse the fact that he can revive and make certain that he kills Blackwen, as this is something only he can do, because he is infinite lives here inside this game-like world. While Yushin is saying all of this, Blackwen unleashes a flurry of attacks, turning Yushin into literally nothing but red paint along the castle floors. A blue light appears, signifying the end of yet another round, as we learn is his 31st life. Yushin realizes that the only way to survive here is by fighting back with his life on the line. He's handed a blade as the woman from earlier tells him that he cannot even compare to Blackwen, even if he tries to fight back. She acknowledges that she can't imagine how painful it is but asks if he still plans to face it head on. Yushin's eyes are filled with determination. It's clear that he has made up his mind. Character development. Yushin slowly opens his eyes to the sight in front of him, the volley of arrows being cut down by the woman from earlier. This time, he doesn't even blink as they were shot at him. The woman says that since he is planning to fight, she will lead and defend. He wonders why he even has to pretend to care about an NPC and stabs his blade into the ground, recalling everything else, and refuses to blindly trust in anyone again. After all, the only choice he has left is to fight. The old man yells, telling everyone that the general has given his command and that the boys need to prepare for battle. All the soldiers shout, ready to lay down their lives for him. The enemy troops make it over the wall, and the battle ensues. Yushin's soldiers begin to fall one by one, barely doing any damage to the enemy troops. Yushin's hands shake while gripping the blade, and he says that he was sick and tired of the battlefield, but now he is used to it, as he refuses to die. The woman tells him that if that's what the general wants, she can teach him the basics of hand-to-hand combat, just as she begins to get rushed by the enemies. She hops back into a baseball-like stance and says the first thing he needs to do, swinging her blade forward. With perfect follow-through on the swing, she quickly readjusts her grip and follows up with another slice, taking down yet another wave of soldiers. She charges forward, deeper into the enemy's push, a blue trail following behind her eyes. Yushin watches in amazement as she handles these soldiers as if they were children, just like Blackwen does. She tells him that even when he's at his limit, he needs to swing his sword until the very end. Yushin is reminded of how strong she is, yet knows that Blackwen still effortlessly kills her too. The old man shouts that the real fight starts now and that they need to fight with their lives on the line. Once again, the soldiers rally and charge forward in their desperate fight against the enemy. Yushin watches as an enemy soldier leaps directly at him. He's surprised but no longer panicked, as he manages to block the attack, proof that he's progressed. He makes eye contact with the enemy, who also appears fearful, but Yushin hesitates, unsure why he is hesitating. The woman from earlier speaks again, killing the enemy in front of him, and tells Yushin the second thing he needs to learn: never hesitate in battle. The man's corpse falls at Yushin's feet, and he realizes that if he wants to survive, he will have to kill. As he watches the life leave the man's eyes, another enemy charges forward, screaming. Yushin reacts, pointing his sword forward, accepting that this is a kill or be killed world, and he must do his part. His blade is slightly faster than his enemy's as it pierces the man's chest. Yushin twists the sword, causing the man to spit up blood, and he starts panting heavily. As the man falls to the ground, Yushin can't believe that killing one man could be this hard. He soon realizes the man didn't go down without a fight. The enemy's blade struck Yushin's chest as well. Yushin drops to his knees, spitting blood, wondering if he might actually survive this wound. Just then, he hears the woman say the final rule: never give up hope of going home, but as he turns to look at her, he wonders what she means by home, saying that she's just an NPC made by Hyungyu. He asks if she even knows what home is and barks at her, saying she doesn't even know the reason why he fights, and she shouldn't act like she knows everything. She gives him an odd stare, and he wonders what exactly it means. As she goes to explain it, she immediately gets impaled by multiple spears, turning her into a porcupine. Yushin is surprised because he really wanted to hear what she had to say. It was something he found very odd. He raises his blade and screams, "Damn it!" and starts to swing it down out of frustration. Then he gets into his stance, saying he'd rather just fight, and as long as he can still swing it, he will do it endlessly. As we see him flailing around, he says he just needs one person. It doesn't have to be many, but as long as it's one, he'll be satisfied with that. He charges straight forward, swinging down on one of the enemies, but instead, he just hits the ground. He says if he gets one, he'll be closer to going home. He grits his teeth and realizes this is the end, as the enemy soldiers quickly collapse on him, doing exactly as they did to the woman, impaling him and killing him on the spot. As he bleeds out, it's time for his next attempt. It jumps to his eyes opening as he quickly gets into stance again, calling the enemies trash while rearing his sword back, asking if they want to die. He swings forward, actually injuring one of the knights. He continues pressing forward, thrusting his blade and hitting a soldier, hitting a collat by stabbing two at the same time. He goes to continue, saying he'll be satisfied with that as it shows progress. He gets stabbed in the chest, and as he falls to die, he says he accomplished his goal in this life. In the next life, we see him swing his sword, cutting someone in half as the enemy's limbs fall to the floor. Yushin's eyes are filled with determination. He says he's definitely getting used to killing people now, as he glares at his next enemy, slicing him as well. The man screams as his legs are cut off, and Yushin finishes by slicing his chest, saying that even the sword's weight is becoming more familiar with each swing. He does a huge swing, cutting yet another soldier, and says that even the feeling of slashing someone has become ingrained into him. He exhales sharply, wondering how many people he's killed this time. He guesses it might be around 5 or 6, and with each attempt, his strength and stamina are increasing. Fortunately, even after he dies, his stats remain the same, which is surely a good thing, but for some reason, he doesn't feel happy at all. The woman calls out to him, and he says that must be it. As she begins to slowly walk toward him, she tries to say something just like last time, but yet again, she falls over, shot up by multiple arrows in the back, killing her. He's tired of this loop repeating, without him being able to hear what she has to say. He still wonders why he even has to go through this in the first place. She looks up at him with tears in her eyes, and he grits his teeth, reminding himself she's just an illusion made by this shitty place, but for some reason, it keeps bothering the hell out of him. We get an even bigger jump this time as Yushin is now on his 65th life. An enemy soldier is being killed, and Yushin says, counting this man, as we see a whole group of corpses. He says, this is number 9. Yushin instantly follows up with the next one, saying, this is 10. All this time, he used to consider himself lucky being able to kill a few of them using his amateur swordsmanship. As the enemies continue charging him, it's clear he now has a different opinion. He grabs onto his cape and throws it over the man he has impaled, covering both of them. The enemies quickly stab, and we see blood pouring from their spears. The end of the cape has come off, as Yushin has used the man as a meat shield, and he smiles, saying he is no longer an amateur. He swings his blade, killing the man in front of him. Quickly following up with another slice, an enemy spearman tries to take advantage of this, attacking from behind. But Yushin sidesteps, narrowly avoiding it. He then grabs onto the tip of the spear and pulls it forward, dragging the enemy down with it. As the enemy falls to the ground, Yushin goes in for the finisher, but before he can, another enemy charges directly from behind. Yushin turns and cuts the man down, though he only manages to cut his leg. Another soldier sees this chance to finish Yushin and charges in, but Yushin quickly finishes him by stabbing him through the throat. As the man's corpse falls, he hears a little gasp, and the man whose legs were cut off begins trying to crawl away. He screams. Yushin raises his sword into the air and stabs the man through his back, saying that he is sure he's getting stronger. All the enemy soldiers begin to feel a little afraid of him, but we see Yushin is completely worn out as his arms are shaking. He says proof of his strength is the fact that he has killed so many soldiers while being injured, yet he still has not fallen. He coughs up blood and wipes it away, looking up for the next fight. But after realizing that he's surrounded, he wonders when he became the last one standing on the battlefield. When he looks around, he can't see the old man or the red-haired knight from earlier. There isn't a single ally left. He wonders if they're dead or if they betrayed him and ran away. He grits his teeth, saying it doesn't matter anymore. From the beginning, this fight was his own, as he has a different goal from the others. He's here to get back home. A soldier carrying something in his hand walks up, and Yushin can't get a clear look, and the man begins to laugh. He throws it directly toward Yushin, and we start to get a better look at what it is. Yushin recognizes the familiar purplish hue as it lands directly in front of him. As it rolls a bit, the face becomes visible, and he starts to realize he was wrong. The enemy soldiers all laugh at him as her cold, lifeless gaze stares at him. He thought he was alone and didn't expect her to still be here. He wonders what the hell she was thinking. While distracted, the enemy soldiers charge forward with their spears, impaling him, ending his 65th life. Then we jump to another time skip. It's now his 97th life, and Yushin asks her why she keeps smiling like that. She wonders what he's talking about, and he asks again why she smiled at that time. She asks him what he means by that time, pulling a spear from her chest. He looks over, seeing her spit out blood, and says that right before she dies, just like right now, she always smiles. He shouts, asking her why she does it, why she keeps trying to protect him instead of running away, demanding answers. He knows she's nothing but an illusion pretending to be his ally, but it continues to bother him. He yells, asking if she really thinks he'll treat her differently just because she's on his side. She goes to say something but stops herself, spotting something. He asks her what she's looking at, saying he's talking to her, but she continues to run directly at him. Yushin still stands there, waiting to hear what she has to say, but she picks up a shield off the ground and raises it above his head. She rests her elbow on his shoulder and her head on his chest, as the sound of arrows hitting the shield can be heard. Yushin looks up to see a volley of arrows raining down upon them. He says this is crazy, asking her if she still plans to say nothing. Her silence continues, as only the sound of the arrows can be heard. Sometime later, Yushin is still sitting there, saying that while he has been trapped in this nightmarish loop of endless deaths, he has realized that he has no allies here, and that he must not trust anybody. Yet, after seeing this woman so many times, sacrificing herself for him, he feels that she is different. She keeps moving in a different pattern with each and every cycle, like she doesn't belong to this world. He wonders, why only her? We start to get a mini montage of her trying to tell him something over and over, but right before she finishes her sentence, she dies every single time. She always says, "General, then somehow dies." Yushin wonders what else she is trying to say. No matter how many times he asks or yells at her, he's never received any answers. This means he has no choice but to change his tactics from now on. An even larger volley of arrows begins to fly from the sky. He stands there, staring at her without even trying to block them. Now, in his 137th life, the old man tells him that the army is moving toward the plain area like usual, but Yushin ignores him. He doesn't care about any of these cowardly bastards and walks past every single one of them, acting as if they aren't even there. Ignoring the army below him, he says there's only one thing that he cares about right now. He gets right into the woman's face and stares at her, saying this is what he cares about. He yells, telling everyone to listen, saying that he will be at the forefront during the enemy attack. The old man and the red-haired knight are both surprised, and the woman tries to tell him he shouldn't do it. He says he's not asking. She looks into his eyes and can tell he's serious, and he says that no matter what, he will stand on the front line. He wonders why she's worried. He readies his blade, yelling, telling everyone it's time to go, as he can now fight alongside his troops. The old man tells everyone to follow the general and to prepare themselves. We see them all ready as the enemies begin to charge in, screaming and preparing their siege ladders once more. As they get closer, they repeat what they did the first time, leaping off with ropes on their arms. As soon as they get to the top, rocks meet them, knocking them down, and the same soldier is killed once more as they breach the wall. Yushin says this time he'll definitely stop those bastards. With his soldiers behind him, he glances at the woman, saying he'll definitely listen to what she has to say and figure out her identity so that he can finally break the pattern of events. He has to make it out of this alive. The soldiers are surprised by how well he's fighting, and we see the woman beginning to run up as well. Yushin swings his blade, fending off the soldiers, as the woman aids him from the side with support. He says that no matter how many attempts it takes, he will make sure to figure out who she is. The actual soldiers finally clash with one another, and one of his boys charges in, only to get taken down mid-charge. Yushin calls them detritus, saying they keep calling him their general, yet they just die every single time. There are also those who see their allies dying and just run away instead, and he's tired of these cowards. But none of this matters to him, as he's experienced it over 100 times now. He glances to his left, spotting the woman in combat, as a man rears his axe back for an attack. The woman is too late to block it, but Yushin throws his sword across the battlefield, stabbing the enemy straight in the chest. As the enemy falls, Yushin pulls his hand back, saying that this is the moment where he'll finally figure it out. As she spits out some blood, he says, just like always, he and she are the last two standing on this battlefield. He slowly approaches her as she kneels on the ground, and he stretches his arms out wide, standing before her. The woman looks up, asking what he's doing. Yushin knows the arrows will soon be raining down upon them. He says she always dies first, so he could never hear it. An arrow flies straight through his arm. She's surprised, but Yushin doesn't even scream. He grits his teeth, saying this time will be different. He won't let her die before him, and he demands that she speak, asking what those last words are that she's been trying to tell him. He begs her to tell him exactly who she is, as the volley of arrows continues to rain down upon them. She realizes something and begins to charge directly at him. She stretches her hands out, grabbing him by his collar, and pulls him in towards her. Then she says, "Right now," as she pivots, putting herself in front of him. He asks what she is doing and tries to push her away, but she jumps forward onto him. He still can't understand what's going on. She sits there, tanking arrows for him. After a bit, the final few arrows land, as there are no more follow-ups. We see that she has at least 7 in her back. She begins to fall forward. She loses her strength, but he holds her up, asking her what she is trying to do. She says the general, line again, and even though it's like this, he still couldn't hear her last words. But now, he can kind of guess what she was trying to say. She just wanted to protect him in the end. He asks why she even wants to, even though she always ends up dead. He can't fathom why she cares about him so much, and he still doesn't even know her name. This entire time, he's just been inhaling copium, denying it over and over. Before he realized it, this woman has become the only person he's accepted as an ally in this place, and nothing else matters but her. In his next life, the old man is yelling, telling him about the enemies again. The same shocked expressions on all the soldiers' faces, along with the red-haired knights, are seen as he stands before the woman once more, saying that he won't ask about her true identity anymore. She glares at him, and he says that instead, he just wants to learn what her name is. She's surprised, and he wonders if he did something to make her feel flustered. He begins to smile, saying he doesn't want to know anything else, so she can at least tell him that much. She stays silent, and he says he doesn't know why, but after coming to this place, this is the first time he's smiled. Then she goes to tell him her name. He watches intently as she puts her head down, saying that she doesn't have one. He's surprised, asking what kind of nonsense that is, and the red-haired knight lets out a sigh. Yushin turns, asking him what the hell is with that reaction. The red-haired knight asks if he's pretending not to know, asking if he forgot about the knight, saying that she's his elite soldier trained to accomplish a great cause. In other words, she's just a tool for war, nothing more, nothing less. All the other soldiers watch, and the red-haired knight continues, saying it's not strange that she doesn't have a name, and that Yushin shouldn't bother about such small details. Yushin tells him to shut the hell up, which surprises both the red-haired knight and the woman. He says that this is his knight, asking why he is trying to treat her like she's a tool. Yet again, everybody's still surprised by his reaction. But in Yushin's eyes, even when everyone else betrayed him and ran away, she stood by him until the very end. Even if she is just an NPC, she's still loyal. He looks over at her, seeing that her head is still down, and he recalls her expression from when she died in his arms. She was giving him a warm gaze. Yushin says that she's definitely different, she's not like the rest of these bastards. He asks her why she is so different. She looks up at him and says that she is not that different, that she is just one of the general soldiers, like the rest. Yushin smiles, saying it's just as he expected. The old man then tells him that the armies are advancing towards the plains. Yushin draws his blade, saying, so be it. From now on, he'll face those endless deaths again. As the enemies begin to climb up the wall, he readies himself for what's to come. The soldiers charge into one another, and once again, Yushin's side gets helplessly overwhelmed. Yushin wonders what this feeling is, his heart is pounding. He says it's not fear, it's something different. He begins to wonder if it's nervousness, feeling an energy from his core, as if it's about to explode. He grits his teeth, saying maybe it's the anger accumulated over all his lives, but he knows that's not it. It's closer to some unknown power wriggling inside his body, making him feel hot and itchy. The soldiers all start glaring back at Yushin, waiting for him to do something. He yells, do not back down. If you have the strength to run away, you still have enough strength to kill one more enemy. A bluish aura begins to emanate from his back, and everybody is surprised. They didn't expect him to actually give an order. The old man asks why they're standing there, dumbfounded, and tells them they need to fight with their lives on the line. The troops charge forward, as the aura continues to flow from Yushin. He turns to the woman, telling her to listen carefully, as this is an order given only to her. She kneels to show respect, and he says, from now on, you cannot dare die before I do. This order genuinely surprises her. He tells her if she breaks this order, he will kill her himself. The blue aura is reflected in her eyes as he walks away, hoping she will stay alive until the end. She can tell he's serious and grabs her blade to prepare. Yushin pushes the red-haired knight aside, telling him that he will lead. His troops are confused by what's going on, and Yushin says that he feels like he can do anything right now. It doesn't matter if there are 1,000,000 or 10,000,000 enemies. He yells, telling his men it's time to go. A countdown for the battle begins as Yushin charges forward on the wall. The countdown hits 0, and a bright blue light appears on the screen at NASA headquarters. Along with a loud sound, a man jolts awake, and yawns, saying he forgot about it. There are quite a few people there still, not paying attention. The man grabs his glasses, surprised that the simulator is still going on, saying no matter who it is, their mental must be broken by now. He instantly starts to scream for Hyungyu, yelling that they need him here. Back at the battlefield, the enemy soldiers are struck with fear as they watch those in front of them helplessly launched into the air by Yushin, who now looks like a true general with his blue aura. He effortlessly marches through the battlefield, taking out enemies just as Blackwind does. Hyungyu, back at the facility, wonders what the hell is going on, and his employees look at him in fear. Yushin's face shows straight confidence, while Hyungyu begins to sweat nervously, wondering if this is some kind of error. We see the woman going to town, slaying enemy after enemy. Hyungyu watches, puzzled, and wonders who she is. Then, he recognizes her, asking, who the hell added the female knight's data into the simulator? He realizes that her data was never intended to be used here in the first place. Understanding it must be some kind of internal error, he concludes that this is an irregular, a bug in the system. In order to maximize mental breakdowns, each repeat of death and reset forces the user to vividly experience the pain of dying, just as Yushin has, feeling each sensation as if it were real over and over again. Hyungyu says that the process carries significant risks, but they've never failed to commercialize it. But now, he wonders, what if someone managed to overcome this endless loop of death? In that process, as if to compensate for all their suffering, they would gain absurdly strong Terra, not explained what it is yet. Still, in this near-perfect simulator that he designed, he believes it's impossible, especially for a high school student. But he can't deny as he is watching the living proof. A soldier tries to surprise Yushin from behind with backshots but instead gets hit in the side by the female knight. Yushin turns around, glad that she's got his back, while Hyungyu wonders if this means that the irregular has some kind of positive influence on this guy's mental state. He yells, telling the NASA team that they need to separate them immediately and delete all the data on the knight. And if there's a lock that cannot be deleted, they need to overload his brain and melt it. They say yes, while pulling their chairs up, and they start working on doing exactly that, going through each and every line of code, trying to eliminate her. Yushin starts to get a weird feeling, wondering what's going on. As everybody's movements begin to slow down, he can see each and every raindrop. He says everything in front of him is in extreme slow motion. He looks at a man drawing back his bow, and when he releases it, as the arrow flies toward Yushin, even that is in slow motion. It bursts a raindrop in front of him, and we see his reflection on it as well. He can't believe how clear this looks. Just as the arrow gets close to his face, he dodges it solely by moving his body. The female knight slices the arrow, and we see she was standing right behind Yushin. He also says that there's another sensation he is feeling. As he begins to hear every sound around him, he can even hear the female knight breathing behind him, saying that she is sticking to the special order very well so far by continuing to fight and not die before him. Yushin smiles for the second time ever, and his blue aura begins to be released again as he stands before a giant. Yushin has no fear in his eyes as the man begins to run directly at him with 2 spears in hand. Yushin widens his stance, and as the 2 spears fly towards him, he quickly slices one with his sword, breaking it. All of his soldiers are shocked, and then he grabs the spear handle, and the broken one, and begins to twist them, using them as a lever to lift the giant's body straight up into the air, slamming him down into the ground. The giant looks up in disbelief as Yushin stands over him, impaling him with his blade, but he doesn't stop there. He pushes off the ground, leaping into the air over the enemies. As his blue aura begins to condense further, he says that he is ready to face anything, and he will go back home no matter what. Yushin lands in the middle of the crowd with a sword, sending some of them flying away. One of them falls to the floor. The reflection in the soldier's eye shows Yushin leaping in. That is the final thing the man sees before he gets cut down on the spot. As the blood flies, Yushin instantly turns for the follow-up. The female knight is here as well, going to town, as 2 men's heads fly through the air. They are fighting side by side, absolutely brawling. She swings her blade, killing yet another soldier, and then turns to help Yushin as he leads the charge forward, with her right on his ass. Yushin starts fighting with full confidence, destroying the enemies in front of him helplessly. We get the POV of one of the soldiers as he begins to try to crawl away, but as soon as he starts, He sees a sword being swung with the blood being cleaned off of it. Before he realizes it, Yushin is standing in front of him. Yushin glares down at him with that blue-like aura, intimidating the soldier who is already scared. The soldier gasps, and as tears fill his eyes, his head gets lobbed off and rolls across the battlefield. Once again, all that is left is just Yushin and the female knight. He looks toward his enemies as she lets out a deep breath. He wonders how many they have killed so far, saying that it must have been in the hundreds by now. He wonders why, instead of the expected gradual decrease, the enemy count appears to be increasing indefinitely. Inside the NASA area, everybody is hard at work spawning more ads, as Hyung-yu sits there smiling nervously, knowing this is his last hope. Yushin, still gripping onto his blade, hears the woman ask him if he is still able to fight. He begins to feel warmth from her back against his. He says that he knows this defies common sense, but he can sense an inexplicable warmth being transmitted through the areas where their cold armors have come into contact. Yushin tells her that even if he can't, he has to do this, since this place is one where he won't be able to survive for even a second unless he continues to fight. The woman tells him that fighting is tough work. Every person, regardless of what peaceful life they appear to lead, has their own battle hidden inside their heart. These words resonate deeply with Yushin, and he begins to recall his school life, of him doing his work and just playing TFT on the side. Bro was really sweating over TFT. She tells him that it is very simple to lose in a fight there, and that he can just give up. He wonders what she means, and she says that giving up is such an easy decision to make, but at that moment everything will come to an end. However, if you remain steadfast in your determination to fight until the bitter end, that battlefield within you will also persist until that moment. Yushin says this must be why, despite the countless deaths he has experienced so far, he can still hold his ground against the enemies in a place like this. And also, behind him is always a reliable person. He asks her why she is always protecting him. He says, as usual, he probably won't get an answer, but he still wants to ask. He tells her that he would really like an answer, because to him, she has become a battlefield that he cannot give up on. She begins to stare at something. Yushin says that he doesn't even have to turn to understand what she's gazing at, and his senses have become so sharp that he can already feel it coming, the pattern that they could not break, not once, ever since the beginning, the arrival of the rain arrows. As they begin to come down right behind him, he calls out to her, asking if she still has yet to give him an answer, asking if that means she has given up. Her expression looks a bit worried this time. The arrows are coming in, and the enemy soldiers are also surrounding them. She determines herself, dropping her blade into the ground, and begins to walk towards Yushin. He says that he has never seen these steps from her before on the battlefield, and they are devoid of any hesitation. It was like she had run out of time, as if her steps were solely for his sake. She grabs onto him as the arrows start coming in, and she says that for her to give up on the general is not something that she has even considered for a second. The arrows pierce her back, and she says that she, just like the general, she will never, ever give up. She holds him tighter. Yushin says that after going through an endless loop of deaths, he thought he had already grown familiar with the battle of death. Yet, there is one thing he still can't get used to. He yells, asking her what she is doing, telling her to move her arms immediately. He swings his blade, blocking the arrows from her back, saying that he has already told her that she can't die before him. She goes to say sorry, but she is too weak to speak. He continues blocking the arrows as they all fly around them, telling her to stop it. Finally, the last arrow lands, and we see that there are 5 arrows in her back. He cuts them off of her. While hugging him, she tells him that he too should never give up on his life. We see her hands starting to lose their grip. She lets go, and her body goes limp while leaning on him. Hyung-yu watches, looking satisfied, thinking that it's over. He tells her not to die. He grabs onto her hand, slamming his sword into the ground, and then puts her on his back. He grits his teeth. We can see that she's actually not dead, she is faintly breathing, and he tells her to open her eyes since he knows that she's not dead yet. He yells, saying that she told him not to give up, and she told him to hold on until the very end. Just like how she will never give up on him, he will never give up on her either. Tears begin to roll down his face, and he yells again, telling her to open her eyes immediately. We hear her take a deep breath, and then she begins to cough up blood. He's surprised that she's actually alive, which means there's a chance that he could get out of here. He begs her not to die, saying if not for herself, at least do it for him. Her breathing gets shallow, and he tells her to hang in there because, at least, she should survive. All the enemy soldiers begin to run in and surround him while grinning. We see Yushin kneeling on the ground, and he curses at Hyung-yu for causing all of this. Hyung-yu is making a worried expression while watching him, and the female knight begins to cough up more blood. Yushin realizes there is no time to get distracted, and grips his blade, saying he needs to get moving, but he is also bleeding out of his mouth, and his legs don't have enough strength to push him off the floor. The enemy soldiers begin charging in, and he starts to yell internally, telling his body to move. As the soldiers get closer, he says even if his flesh is torn, and the muscles get destroyed, he will move. His eyes begin to release that blue-like aura, and the air around him tenses up. He tightens the grip on his blade, and begins to actually stand up off the floor while screaming in pain. He says his body feels like it's being ripped apart, but alongside that indescribable power he has, he feels as if he is able to continue forward. He finally begins to get into his stance, cracking the ground below his feet. He yells, saying that he needs to stand up and continue marching forward. He lets out a primal scream while swinging his blade, unleashing a giant blue wave that emits from his blade, tearing the enemies to pieces, causing their meat chunks to fall to the floor. His primal screams blend in with those of the fearful soldiers as he starts ripping them apart like a pit bull at a daycare. But he continues dashing through the enemies, pushing forward for the female knight. Blood begins to soar through the air while Hyung-yu watches Yushin's onslaught. He wonders what the hell is up with his strength. One of the men says it's hard to pinpoint the cause, wondering what the hell is going on here, as they are just getting spammed with error messages, saying that the combat level has exceeded permissible limits. They start to compare his attack to Blackwen's, saying it's now on a similar level, as he is effortlessly destroying everything. He continues dashing, all the while still carrying the female knight on his back, showing off his dominance. The soldiers begin to shake in fear, and the knight calls out to him. Yushin turns to look at her, and she says that before it's too late, she would love for him to give her a name. This catches him off guard, and he wonders why she's doing it now, of all times. He says that he'll give her one later rather than now. She begins to shake her head, and he finds it odd since she usually unconditionally obeys his commands. She tells him if he gives it to her now, she will never forget it, even if she does die. Yushin tries to think of one, then looks up towards the sun above the enemy soldiers, and says fine, and gives her the name Sepia, saying from now on that will be her name. She smiles and tells him that it's a good name, and she says that it's a name that reminds her of the sunset that would redden the reeds in her hometown. Her body then goes even more limp, as that was her final breath. Yushin still holds on to her arm, keeping her on his back. He grits his teeth out of anger, and roars. Yushin says he'll never give up on Sepia. His aura begins to fade, as the enemy soldiers recognize this, and yell, saying now is their chance. They all charge directly at him with their blades, impaling him. Ending this round, he begins to get warnings. The warnings are still appearing on his attack, and he is now in his 138th loop. Hyung-yu sits there looking anxious, saying that he managed to kill him this time, but he doesn't know how it's going to keep going, as Yushin's growth is really explosive. Hyung-yu starts to clench his teeth, and then, one of the NASA workers, calls out to him, saying he thinks he's found the issue, the way to separate Yushin from the female knight. In Yushin's mind, he's still thinking about Sepia, and how she said it was a good name, and he's angry that he couldn't save her. He was eventually able to use that strange energy blast, but he couldn't break through the enemy line. Nonetheless, this time for sure, even if it means severing all of his enemies' throats, we see him standing up as he starts calling out for Sepia, and he is in his 139th attempt. The old man yells, telling him the same lines about the troops coming towards the plains. Yushin still resolves himself to save Sepia. He looks up towards the battlefield, and yells out her name as loud as he can, but is met with nothing but silence. He turns, continuing to yell it, saying that she told him that she wouldn't forget this name. He starts to scan his troops, but all of their faces are met with confusion. The red-haired knight and the old man look at him like he's lost his mind. Yushin wonders why he can't find Sepia anywhere. He spots her sword on the ground, but she is not here. He gets a gut-wrenching feeling, and his heart starts to sink as he continues yelling, looking around, asking her where she is. The soldiers are surprised by his reactions, and the red-haired knight asks him who he's looking for, and calls him General, but he regrets saying that, because he doesn't like calling him that, as he thinks it's embarrassing. He is a person who assumed the mantle of General, when in reality he's just cowardly garbage who frequently runs away. That is the Yushin that he knows. How is it possible that this kid in front of him is exuding the authority that only a true general would possess? As Yushin is subconsciously releasing his aura, and he yells, asking where the hell Sepia is. The old man says only God knows who he is looking for, as they do not. Yushin stretches his hand out, grabbing onto the old man by his collar. The red-haired knight calls out to him, drawing his blade, and they start to point it at Yushin, as he is holding the man up with one arm. Yushin says that he's aware that they would rather follow the old man than him, and he can see that they're all ready to fight him, and that he also knows that this old man regards him as a dumb mutt who is a coward. The old man asks him what he is saying. Yushin raises his hand further into the air, saying, regardless of all of that. The old man looks scared, and begins to cough, calling out to Yushin to let him go. The red-haired knight says there's no way, including the armor, he should weigh more than 100 kilograms, yet he was able to pick him up that easily. Moreover, we finally learn the old man's name is Hallenberg, and that he is a knight of the order and can manipulate a portion of Terra. He's not an opponent that Yushin should be able to handle with just his own strength. Yushin yells, saying he doesn't care what they think about him. All he wants to know is just one thing, and he asks where the hell Sepia is. The red-haired knight thinks that he's fully gone crazy, wondering who the hell Sepia even is, and he says that they have no idea who he's talking about, and that he should please first let go of Hallenberg. Yushin slowly begins to grin and turns towards him, while releasing his bloodlust. A shiver runs down the red-haired knight's spine, and he says there's no way he's feeling threatened by him. Yushin throws Hallenberg away, and begins to charge straight in towards the red-haired knight. Hallenberg hits the ground, as Yushin is already directly in his face, and he grabs the red-haired knight by his throat, lifting him into the air, saying that he could answer him, calling him arrogant. Hallenberg screams his name, asking how he can move like that, and tells him to calm down as there's not even a single person with Sepia here, and that the civilians have already evacuated. He then feels a sharp pain in his stomach, and begins to cough out blood as Yushin has kicked him, sending him flying across the wall. The soldiers are all astonished. Keep in mind, he did this while holding the other man up with one arm. Hallenberg rolls across the castle wall, and Yushin says that the Sepia he is searching for is not a civilian, as she's someone that trash like them can't even compare to. As the red-haired knight begins to lose consciousness, Yushin explains that she is his sole companion on the never-ending battlefield. She is a knight among knights. He's talking about that longsword's owner we see on the floor. Hallenberg looks at it, and asks Yushin if he is perhaps talking about number 232. Yushin's bloodlust begins to increase as he starts to release his aura, making Hallenberg scared. Yushin slowly approaches him, and Hallenberg wonders how that oppressive shadow approaching him is still the cowardly mutt that he used to know. With each heavy step, he is getting closer and closer. Hallenberg says that his appearance is similar to that of an Empire's supreme commander, and he says that his appearance right now is the same as that of his predecessor, aka his father. Yushin stretches his hand out towards him, saying that her name is Sepia, not 232, asking where the hell she is. Hallenberg says that he does not know, and the only thing he does know is that she is in the casualty ward. Yushin is surprised by this, wondering why she is there, and tells his men to lead the way immediately. Further on the castle wall, we see him walking forward with his soldiers behind him. He barges into a room, calling out for Sepia. All he is greeted with are injured soldiers who all look confused on why the general is here, but in the back, he spots a woman on the bed, and it is none other than Sepia. His heart instantly sinks, and he quickly runs over, looking down to make sure that it is her, and wonders what is going on. She is completely comatose. The nurses start to ask him what he is doing there, and Yushin asks what happened. They say that they are not sure either, as they couldn't find the cause. They tell him that she has been here for 10 days, and that she has been in this state the entire time. Yushin is surprised that it has been that long, saying just now they have been fighting together, yet she has been laying here for the past 10 days. He begins to smile, saying indeed this is a hella screwed up place where Hyungyu is capable of playing tricks like this, and he asks if she will ever wake up again. The nurses say that this is impossible to answer, and tell him to keep his voice down while he is here. Yushin ignores them, asking if he will ever be able to see her open her eyes and wake up. He wonders if this means that he can only watch helplessly as he loses her. He internally screams her name. Everybody in the ward can immediately tell how much she means to him based on how he is acting, and a woman tells him that he will be able to see her again. Yushin turns, and the nurse says that if it is the Virgin Mary, she can treat any kind of illness, and if he can take Sepia to her, she is sure that she can be saved. Yushin thinks about it, and asks her what he has to do to meet her. Back on the castle walls, the siege ladders are put back up as the enemy troops begin to rush up, killing the guards. The nurse says there is only one way to meet her, and that is to win this battle. Now, our boy realizes what he has to do, and he needs to lock in. One of Yushin's men runs into the room yelling, saying that the enemies have breached the headquarters and will soon be here. Yushin forgot that they were this persistent, and then tells Sepia to hold on because only then would the battle finally be over. And he's only confessing this now, but actually, while fighting, there were countless times when he considered giving up. While the battle rages outside, he kneels down right beside her, grabbing onto her hand, saying it's only thanks to her. The enemies have now made it into the infirmary, and Yushin says that he regained his faith in this hell only because her back was always there. Because of that, the moment she disappeared, he fell apart. If she really disappeared, he thinks that he would be crushed to death by this never-ending loop. But now, he definitely has a reason to continue fighting. The enemy soldiers make their way toward him, and he begins to emanate his general aura. He says he will not give up until he wins, as that is the only way for him to go home and the only way to save Sepia. He swings his sword while yelling, unleashing a flurry of slashes in front of him toward the enemies with his blade, sending them all soaring through the sky, getting cut to pieces. He says that he'll make damn sure that he does not give up ever again. The second wave of enemies begins to charge in, and he swings, saying that he hopes they're ready because he's only getting started. His attack comes out, and we see it shattering the infirmary from the outside, completely exploding the entire ward. As the enemies get sent flying out of the side of the building, Yushin stands there in the wreckage of the hole, still releasing his aura. But the enemies don't give up, as they continue to come in. They all point their swords at him, preparing to impale him, and he raises his sword into the air, releasing even more aura than before. We hear the sound of a shockwave go off inside the room, and bodies hitting the wall, but we don't get to see what happens. Immediately after, Yushin is leaping out of the wall, having impaled a soldier through the chest with his blade. The soldier looks like he's about to stab him with his spear, and all of Yushin's men look up in fear as they are escaping while he is fighting for his life. He takes a second to lock out of battle mode and glances over toward Hallenberg and the red-haired knight, who look back up to meet their eyes with him, and he feels nothing but absolute disgust at the fact that they are constantly running away, even now. The impaled soldier does exactly what I thought he was going to do by bringing his spear down, impaling Yushin straight through the chest as he is still looking at Hallenberg and the rest, feeling nothing but anger and betrayal. As he is left to do nothing but fall to his death, he has now ended his 139th loop. Yushin says that he had a particular thought during that loop. Or well, in general about this never-ending loop, he wonders when it will end in the first place. And now, in this turn, that was reset without her, he wonders if he's going to just die again and again, unable to actually win. And in the end, amidst all this agony, without Sepia, he'll have to fight alone from now on. There is no need to even consider receiving support from his troops, they will just put up with it for a while before running away. But something makes him curious, and he wonders why they are trying to run away in the first place in a dead-end battle like this. He realizes something and says, "No way." On his 140th loop, Hallenberg yells, telling him about the typical shit. Yushin looks up at the sky, asking if the reinforcements are here yet. And Hallenberg asks what he is saying. Yushin asks why he is so surprised, saying he is only asking if the reinforcements have arrived. The red-haired knight looks worried, and Hallenberg asks him what he is talking about by reinforcements. And Yushin says, as expected, and he begins to smile, saying that it seems like there are reinforcements available that he is not even aware of. And it's even a sizable force of reinforcements to begin with. He begins to laugh, saying he doesn't even need to ask them anymore. However, the fact they withheld this information from him, it pisses him off. He begins to grin, saying now he understands the plan. The red-haired knight asks him what he means, and Yushin says that they only use the archers to stall for time in the first place. The descendant bullshit, or whatever that was just a ploy to push him over the edge. It wasn't because they were expecting anything from him to begin with in his original loops. They only wanted to send him out as a sacrifice while waiting for the reinforcements. What they needed was just a clown dressed as a general. Clowns get paid $50K a year, and bro had to do it for free. He says apart from this, there is no other explanation for all the crap that they pulled. From the very beginning, he was surrounded by people who were desperate to offer up his neck to Blackwen. Hallenberg tries to plead with him, and Yushin recognizes him, and the Red Knight, who we learn is named Joseph. Joseph is surprised, and Yushin says whatever their reasons or beliefs are, they can stop acting like hypocrites now. Joseph starts to get angry and grits his teeth, saying that it was all unavoidable. Other than that, they didn't have any other choice. Yushin says now he understands why they did it because they truly believe there wasn't another choice, except for only one person in the entire army. And if he were in their shoes, he might not have been in a much different position anyway. It was a good strategy. But, as they know, he must win this battle. So, starting now, they'll abandon the strategy of waiting for reinforcements. Fear starts to set among the soldiers, and Joseph asks what he's talking about by saying something so ridiculous. Hallam Burke slams his sword into the ground and starts to call out to Yushin, asking him if he thinks this battle is just child's play. Yushin says these bastards are the sort that would consider fleeing before the battle even began, and yet, they dare look down on the situation. But for him, even death cannot free him from this loop. He gives Hallam Burke a very cold glare, thinking about all of his previous deaths, and he says even if his body is torn apart, he cannot stop moving. Because if he does, he won't see Sepia again. He yells, saying he will not repeat himself, and tells all of the knights to assemble in front of the castle gates immediately. The soldiers are all worried, and there is no movement atop the castle walls, so now the enemies are apprehensive about approaching. We see a horse as they are all making their way to the front gate, like Yushin had instructed, with multiple horses, maybe to create a diversion. We'll find out. Hallam Burke asks if they've gathered all the horses, and the stable master says yes, but there was a problem. Hallam Burke asks what's wrong, and the stable master looks back at the barn, saying that it's just that one of the horses is putting up a fight, refusing to budge, and has knocked down 3 of their men. Hallam Burke understands what horse he's talking about now, as it's none other than General Lee's horse, which would be Yushin's father's. His horse looks like it has been through some war. Yushin begins to walk down the steps, making the soldiers audibly gulp, as he no longer looks like a feeble boy, as when he first inherited the position. Yushin asks if this is everything, and Hallam Burke says yes, asking what the plan is. Yushin says, good, and tells them to open it. Hallam Burke is confused, asking what they're meant to open, and Yushin points over to the side, telling them he means the gate, and that it needs to be opened immediately. He yells, saying they all need to listen to his words carefully, they're going to open that gate and go outside. The soldiers begin to panic, and Yushin says they will break through by taking advantage of their adversary's distraction as they focus only on attacking the wall. After that, they will push their way through the back of the army, advancing all the way to Black Wen's base. Then, when they are there, they will actually fight Black Wen and vanquish him, driving the enemies away once the general is gone. That is the only way for them to survive this war. They stare at him like he is crazy, but he continues marching down the stairs. Inside the barn, his father's horse senses something and takes in a deep breath, looking excited. A lot of the soldiers' hands start to tremble, and Joseph starts mocking them. One of them falls to the floor, asking how they expect to go back alive, and Joseph laughs, asking Yushin what he is thinking with such a shitty plan. Yushin glares down at him, and Joseph asks if he's gone crazy because he wants to die. Hallam Burke asks how dare he speak to the general like that. Joseph says using just this much force, he wants to storm into the enemy's base, and that he's a fool who can't even understand the situation. Yushin says they are the ones who don't understand the situation they are in, and they are so delusional that they believe Black Wen will let them live if they plead for their lives after he cuts his throat. Joseph realizes that he is right, and so do the soldiers, but they don't know the real reality, as Yushin has experienced it countless times. For Black Wen is a ruthless man, he does not care for mercy, or if you try to beg for your life, as Joseph and Hallam Burke have died every single loop as well. He tells them it will not work. A door gets sent flying out of the stable, and the soldiers look over to see Yushin's father's horse slowly approaching them. Joseph says it's definitely the old general's, wondering what it's doing, as it starts to let out some pretty high hoarse sounds. Even the soldiers begin to wonder why it's here, and Yushin looks over at it. Joseph asks what they are doing, saying they need to grab the horse and calm it down. The soldiers begin to charge toward it, and the horse lowers himself down, and raising his hind legs, kicking 2 soldiers in the chest. I'm pretty sure those 2 just died. The stable master runs in, asking the horse to stay still, only to get head-butted, causing him to fly through the air. The soldiers then throw out lassos, 3, to be exact, and they wrap around the horse's head. They yell, pull, as they try to calm the horse down by lowering its face to the floor. But the horse itself doesn't move, and they wonder why it's so damn strong. Yushin jumps off the steps, soaring through the air over the soldiers. He swings his sword down, cutting the ropes, causing the soldiers to fall to the floor. He stands before them all, and stands back up, saying that if he leaves them be, they'll be the first to get trampled to death by that horse. Hallam Burke yells not to go near it, saying that it's no ordinary horse. Yushin wonders why it's going so wild, and it looks like it's trying to say something. The horse's eyes begin to glow blue, just like Yushin's. On the other side of the gate, we see that the war has finally started, as the enemy soldiers have made it up the ladders towards the top of the wall and are now engaging and taking the high ground. The horse begins to grin, and Yushin does too, saying he understands. The horse charges directly at him, and Yushin opens his arms. Hallenberg warns that it's dangerous, saying he can't have Yushin die here. As the horse gets closer, it runs right beside Yushin, and he grabs onto one of the ropes tied around its throat, beginning to release his general's aura while pulling the rope back. The rope becomes taut, and the horse actually stops. It starts to fight back, trying to pull Yushin, but Yushin maintains his ground and smiles, saying that this is fun. He asks the horse if it feels the same way he does, and if it also wishes to go crazy on this bloody battlefield. He says that even in this hellhole, there's still a guy who is a little likable, and he tells the horse to come with him, as he tugs on the rope. He adds that the only way to end this battle is to take down Blackwen, and that they should go cleave through the lion's throat together. The horse's eyes begin to look like they understand Yushin. And through its eyes, we see that it can also feel Yushin's general-like aura. It recalls Yushin's father from him and sees their faces overlapping. The horse bows its head out of respect, and everyone is surprised. Joseph looks worried as the horse starts to kneel, saying there's no way this is happening, as Yushin is releasing his aura, dominating the horse in front of everybody. Hyung-yu wonders what's going on, seeing the simulation bugging, and says this cannot be happening. As Yushin's troops begin to actually take the horses and ride across the battlefield, we see, for the first time in their lives, they have eyes full of determination. This is because the person leading them is a reliable general, none other than Yushin himself. Yushin says this is his first time riding a horse and wonders if this is how it always feels. He notes that he doesn't feel any discomfort or fear of falling, and wonders why, before realizing it must be because the horse is adjusting his pacing, sensing his clumsiness. He smiles, saying he's a great horse. He tightens his grip around the horse and says that he's good and can run as fast as he wants. Thanks to these heightened senses he awakened at some point, he doesn't need such considerations anymore. The horse understands, and we see it also begin to emit its aura while kicking into overdrive, speeding forward much faster than before. Yushin readies a spear in his hand, heading straight towards the enemy army, and he quickly gains a big gap in distance. His soldiers can only watch helplessly, as his horse is just actually built different. Yushin raises his hand into the air and yells, saying it's time to push through to get to Blackwen. The enemy soldiers, still seizing their castle, turn around only to see Yushin and his cavalry flanking from the side. Yushin throws his spear, and as it soars through the air, we see it pierce one of the soldiers' chests, killing him instantly. The spear generates so much torque that it continues to twist, ripping the man's body into literal shreds. The poor guy turns into a red mist, and the spear continues moving through the army, flying towards its target. But we don't see the target yet. Instead, we cut to a sword flying through the air, soaked in blood, and Yushin's soldiers dying as one of them falls off the castle wall, landing in the enemy's front line. In the back of the army, we see none other than Blackwen, sitting atop his horse, watching the battle from afar, waiting for his moment to strike. He watches the castle, lost in thought, and says that soon, it will all be over. He then says Yushin's father's name, which is the same as Yushin's, and starts to get angry. His eye begins to bleed, and he says that it was the Reaper who took his left eye. We see Yushin's father, swinging his blade in front of him, wearing a devilish grin, and it's clear that this was Yushin's father. Now has come the time for Blackwen to slit the throat of the descendant. But he's heard a rumor that this son of his has a reputation for being a miserable, cowardly piece of trash. If that rumor is true, then he'll just dig out both of his eyes before finishing him off, so that he doesn't tarnish his rival's reputation. We see Blackwen releasing his red aura, and the spear continues traveling through the enemy until it finally hits the ground in the midst of the army. All the enemy soldiers look at it in fear, wondering what the hell is going on, as Yushin leaps over them with his horse. He lets out a sigh, and the enemy soldiers realize it's an ambush, yelling that they need to stop him. Yushin swings his sword down, instantly cutting the arms off a few of the enemy soldiers, creating more distance. The horse begins to release more aura, landing on some soldiers and Goomba stomping them to death, even headbutting one, with enough force to pop his head like a watermelon. They have now made their way deep into the enemy army, and the enemy soldiers yell that he's alone, so they shouldn't back down, they need to surround and kill him. The enemy soldiers ready their spears, knowing he's on horseback, and Yushin looks over at them. He tightens the reins on the horse, causing it to turn as well, and the horse understands, heading straight into the spears. Yushin grabs one of them off the floor and raises it up while letting out a primal scream. He swings the spear with all of his strength, while Black Wen is just hoping that Yushin won't disappoint him, calling him the descendant of the Reaper. We see Yushin's attack instantly take down a large chunk of the enemy army. When he follows up, quite a few of the soldiers lose their heads. Yushin readies himself once again and smiles, saying that he's just getting warmed up. The enemy soldiers begin to collapse on all sides towards him, and Yushin's men are genuinely surprised, exclaiming that the general has opened a way through. They realize they need to follow him in. Joseph and Helen Burke charge in, and Yushin tells them that if they want to stay alive, they can't be left behind. They need to go full speed ahead, as they're heading straight for Black Wen. The enemy soldiers ready their spears to stop the cavalry, but Yushin doesn't care. He raises both his spear and sword into the air, unleashing a powerful attack that sends their defensive line flying, with blood soaring everywhere. Black Wen senses something, wondering whose aura that was just now. Some of his men ride up on horseback, calling out to him, and he asks what is going on. They inform him that they're being ambushed by the enemy troops. Black Wen questions what kind of nonsense they're talking about and demands to know who dared to ambush him. One of the men says he doesn't want to believe it either, but it's true, the one leading them is none other than the Reaper's descendant. Black Wen warns him that if he's lying, he'll rip his tongue out before killing him slowly. The man insists that he's certain, and Black Wen begins to smile with excitement. He instantly bursts into crazy laughter, wondering who it was that said Yushin was a coward. No sane person would ever think of breaking into his territory, and now Black Wen can't believe that Yushin personally came for him. He decides he should give Yushin a proper present. The enemy soldiers start swarming Yushin's group, but on Yushin's side, he's easily dismantling them, as if it were child's play. He declares that it doesn't matter if there are thousands or tens of thousands, because they don't have enough to block him. No matter what, he's going to push through towards Black Wen. A war horn gets blown by a man on horseback, and all the enemy soldiers snap to the attention stance. Yushin looks over, realizing what's happening, as a volley of arrows begins to fly directly toward him, landing just shy of their mark. Yushin is surprised that the arrows didn't reach, and he wonders what's going on. He begins to follow them, noticing that they have markings on them, as if they're guiding him. We see Black Wen with 3 of his commanders in front of him. He points his fingers outward, commanding them to go forth. Yushin continues charging through the army, and Black Wen smiles, saying it really is his aura he's sensing. Yushin screams out Black Wen's name, charging directly forward. He says that all he needs is the sword he's familiar with. His soldiers watch in awe, and so do the enemies, as well as people from all over, witnessing him charging straight into the lion's den by himself. Yushin says he can't control it, the spark of power that's burning within him. But as long as he can hold it for just a moment, it's enough. He starts to gather all that power onto the tip of his blade, channeling his aura directly into it. The air around them becomes much denser, and Black Wen laughs, saying this is very good. He needs Yushin to be at his strongest for him to fully enjoy ripping him apart. Yushin raises his sword into the air once again, letting out another primal scream, and Black Wen comes in with his axe as they prepare to clash. Both of their auras collide, creating a super bright light and a shockwave that pushes everyone back. Some soldiers catch absolute strays from their weapons colliding with one another. The others brace themselves, trying not to fall over. Black Wen unleashes yet another full force attack but is surprised because Yushin has actually blocked it. He says there's no way that this young man has the power to block him, the messenger of Namiya and the incarnation of the lion. He grits his teeth in frustration and begins to channel more aura into his axe, doing his best to push Yushin down. Yushin says he expected this, but Black Wen has such monstrous strength. He grits his teeth while pushing up, saying that, in the end, he still got pushed back. He turns his blade sideways to deflect Black Wen's attack, but Black Wen notices this. Yushin says he refuses to just give up and not fight back. He instantly goes in for a counter swing, knocking Black Wen's axe backward. Black Wen manages to regain his stability, and Yushin says that now that he's come this far, he'll never give up again. But while he's still monologuing, Black Wen comes in with another heavy swing of his axe. Yushin does his best to block it, but the attack has too much force behind it. Black Wen gets a full swing through, and Yushin is sent flying off his horse. He manages to stop himself midair by stabbing his sword into the ground to kill his momentum. He begins to cough up blood, realizing that there's still such a big gap between them. He starts to channel more aura into his blade, but Black Wen doesn't give him a moment to recover, already charging straight in. Yushin admits he genuinely thought the gap would be smaller. Black Wen smiles as he comes in for a finishing swing, slashing down at Yushin. Yushin narrowly escapes as the attack destroys the landscape around him. Gritting his teeth, he realizes he needs to stay focused. As he dodges another attack, he says that if he loses concentration, he will die. Dodging yet another attack, Blackwen mocks him, asking where all that energy from earlier went, asking if he's already done impersonating his father. Yushin says he really wants to crush that smug face of his and spots what he thinks is an opening, saying, "Now." He charges straight in, aiming for Blackwen's horse as it rides directly toward him. Yushin lowers his blade, and as soon as the horse gets in range, he slashes with all his might, causing the horse to fall to the ground. But then he looks around, wondering where Blackwen went, realizing that he only took down the horse. He suddenly feels the air tense above him and looks up to see Blackwen coming down from above with a heavy, aura-imbued attack. Yushin admits he thought he was strong enough, but he can't even move due to the pressure. This insurmountable gap in their power makes it feel like they aren't even the same species. Blackwen starts the same slash attack that has killed Yushin multiple times. Yushin screams, pushing his blade up and grabbing it with his other hand to block the attack. Blackwen's axe comes into contact with his sword, and he remarks that it's a shame, but it seems like the fun has ended. As Yushin's sword breaks into pieces, he thinks he can't believe the difference is still this big. In his final moments, he looks back at Blackwen and notices that he's actually a bit gassed out. Now Yushin understands, this is how it was. Usually, everything ends with that critical strike, so he never knew what came next. But if such a strong attack is used continuously, even if Blackwen is considered the messenger of death, he will eventually tire. Yushin begins to grin as he fades into the next loop and says, moving forward, there's only one thing he needs to do. A new message appears on the screen. Simulation completed. It shows Yushin's name, stating he is currently ranked 6th, and the data on experience points acquired is being computed. The scene jumps back to Blackwen coming in with that heavy attack above Yushin, who is back in the same position. As Blackwen's attack descends, the shockwave from it spreads out. Blackwen is surprised to see Yushin sidestepping at this time. Yushin mutters to himself that all he needs to do is keep dodging and holding on, forcing Blackwen to keep releasing attack after attack. Eventually, Yushin dies again and acquires more points, moving into yet another loop. In another loop, we see Yushin already fighting again, getting knocked backward. He manages to deflect one of Blackwen's attacks and counters with his own, imbuing his blade with aura. Blackwen, seeing this, unleashes a powerful attack to block it, smiling and saying this makes the fight even more fun. Yushin begins to run back in, thrusting his sword directly at Blackwen's face, saying he only needs to last 30 more seconds. As they clash again, Blackwen looks to his side and notices Yushin gritting his teeth, realizing that he has dodged his attack. Blackwen stretches his hand forward, grabbing Yushin's head and palming it like a basketball. Lifting him into the air, he slams him down into the ground with immense force. Yushin coughs, his face strained, as Blackwen raises his axe into the air, yelling for him to die. As the axe comes down, Yushin thinks to himself that he just needs to last a little longer next time, and his next life begins. The exact same sequence unfolds. But this time, when Blackwen reaches out to grab Yushin's head, Yushin ducks under it. Backpedaling to create more distance, he grits his teeth, realizing he needs to buy even more time until Blackwen tires out. He charges back in, and Blackwen blocks his attack. Yushin thinks that this battle, or perhaps from the moment he set foot on this battlefield, the outcome has been set in stone. He gets sent flying through the air once more but remains resolute, saying that all his countless deaths were not just meaningless, they were his stepping stones toward victory. Now, he just needs 10 more seconds to exhaust Blackwen. He retightens his grip on his blade, knowing he must endure even if it feels like he's dying. He manages to flip with the attack, stabbing his sword into the ground to kill his momentum. Now, there are only 9 seconds left. He places his palm on the ground and pushes off, charging back in for another attack. Blackwen blocks with his axe, and time continues to tick away. Yushin starts to grin, letting go of his sword and launching himself directly toward Blackwen's face. Blackwen looks confused as Yushin rushes toward him, planting his foot on Blackwen's axe and leaping into the air. While his sword is still airborne, Yushin's countdown is getting closer and closer. He manages to re-grab it, with just 5 seconds left. He swings it down into the dirt, destroying the terrain, and sends rocks flying toward Blackwen. Blackwen jumps back to avoid the debris, now with only 3 seconds remaining. Yushin lands back on the ground, spitting up blood, and Blackwen yells, asking how dare he defy him. Yushin thinks to himself that losing a battle is simple, all one has to do is give up. But if you refuse to give up, the battle will continue, and these are Sepia's words that he has lived by from loop to loop. He says it's finally time to end this. With the countdown hitting 0, he swings his sword with all his might. Yushin's attack comes out directly towards Blackwen. He realizes this is bad and does his best to get away from it. Even though Yushin missed, he still held on for as long as he wanted. He falls to his knees since Blackwen had to go hella far to avoid the attack, and now they are back a good distance away. Blackwen's soldiers were surprised, and so were the people at NASA. Blackwen smashes the ground, calling out to him, asking how he's losing, to a guy he took lightly because all he had to his name was the title of being the Reaper's son. Yet, he's losing to this child. He plans to kill him this next time. If he just lets him be, he'll definitely become a disaster to the Empire. He yells, "Die!" And all of his men just stand there, dumbfounded. Blackwen asks why they're just watching, saying they need to kill him immediately. And they need to cut off both of his arms and legs and drag him back to the Empire as a prisoner of war. The men shout, "Yes!" And Yushin starts to laugh very loudly, in a kind of mocking tone as well. The soldiers get nervous, but Blackwen's annoyed. Yushin says he thought he was a general in every sense of the word, and he can't believe Blackwen actually asked for someone else's help in the end. He lets out a sigh, saying that just because he felt that his life was in danger, he's no different from the trivial trash he's fought until now. Blackwen starts to get pissed, and Yushin says he's been living through this hell just to knock them down. He says you shouldn't try to run away. Come at me like a man with your axe. Blackwen begins to lose all reasoning due to his anger and runs forward with his axe. The soldiers start to run away from something behind them, and when they both turn to look, they see it's none other than Yushin's troops slaughtering Blackwen's men one by one. They yell that it's an ambush and that the enemy troops have come from their flank, as we see the cavalrymen have finally caught up. Blackwen's men quickly run over to him, telling him that he has to get out of here immediately. They hop him on a horse, and he begins to run, saying that he'll never forget this humiliation. Yushin just looks pissed that he's leaving. All of Blackwen's men watch as he flees, then begin throwing their weapons and running after him, completely abandoning the fight, whereas Yushin's side sits there with their weapons ready. Yushin is still in battle mode, releasing his aura, but as soon as he lets go, he falls backward to the ground, saying now he might be able to save Sepia. A horse approaches him, and a woman asks if he is still alive. Yushin's body is heavily injured, and he can't really think straight, wondering if that's Sepia. The woman yells, saying they need to prepare a transport, as there's an injured person here, and they need to hurry. Yushin hopes that when he opens his eyes again, he will see Sepia. We get a flashback to a woman holding onto a ring, crying. A long time ago, there was a story of a woman who left the battle with nothing but drops of her tears, and she left behind a ring as a promise of her return. Years have passed, and the girl waits endlessly, but regardless of how many tears she shed, she could never return, and the promise of the ring remained unfulfilled. We hear the sound of water hitting a chain, and Yushin slowly opens his eyes, saying he thought he heard somebody calling his name. Someone is indeed calling out to him, saying he needs to wake up. He quickly looks around, asking if he's returned back to his ordinary life, only to see troops looking at him with fear. Yushin is surprised, and a woman asks if he's come to his senses, calling out his name. Yushin asks if he really hasn't returned yet, asking why this isn't the end, and how much more he needs to go through. One of the soldiers goes to draw his blade, telling him to stop, but the woman says that the man doesn't understand that the chain can't be broken, as it's something they use only inside the castle. She sits down, telling Yushin to tell her everything that he knows. Since he keeps babbling, he says he remembers meeting her back at Elog, Korea. I completely forgot about Maria. Yushin says they can start after they die. The chains begin to crack, and she says that's impossible, as those are the chains that lift the castle gate. The soldiers look worried, as they should be, because Yushin launches the chains across the room with his sheer strength. The chains fly out towards the soldiers, hitting some of them and knocking them to the ground. Yushin runs forward, and the men call him a monster. Yushin is just pissed. He elbows one of the soldiers in the face and kicks another one, sending him flying out of the room. One soldier drops his sword, and Yushin grabs it out of the air, striking one of the soldiers down and cutting off the arm of another. They all begin to scream as he even cuts one in half. Maria watches in fear, but Yushin is determined to get out, and she asks him what the hell he is. He stretches his hand out, grabbing her by the throat and lifting her into the air. She begins to cough, and he says, from now on, only he gets to ask the questions. He says he remembers her, she's the woman he met before the test, and she had a conversation with Hyungyu. He couldn't understand it, so she'd better start explaining everything she knows, because his patience is already gone. She calls him crazy, saying it's not a stretch to say he's on the same combat level as Blackwen, and he's definitely a third-ranked knight, yet he knows nothing about this place. He sighs, dropping his sword, saying, "Why is it that nobody listens to me in this place?" He grabs onto her leg, saying there's one thing he's sure of since he came to this world with her: if she dies, she'll be reset. She asks what the hell he's talking about, and he begins to squeeze her leg tightly. She screams, saying, "Don't." He says she'll be okay since she'll be reset anyway, and she just needs to bear with the pain until she dies, asking if he's wrong. He then crushes her ankle. She screams in pain, and it echoes throughout the entire area, alerting the guards outside, who sit there looking at the gates confused. While she is grunting in pain, Yushin says he'll do the other leg next time, but she says no, she'll tell him everything. He smiles, saying, "Finally," but she has a condition. Whatever happens in the future, he needs to be her ally and help her fight. He looks annoyed, asking who she thinks she is to be in a position to bargain with him, and he grabs higher on her leg, around her thigh specifically. She realizes that he's not giving her any leeway, and she starts to panic. He asks why she's doing this for a game and if she's really a part of the company. She asks if he really thinks this is just a game and says it isn't. He asks what she means, and she says he needs to accept her conditions first. He says, okay, that he doesn't care for anything but sepia anyway, so it doesn't matter who he fights. She tells him to listen well, the thing they are playing right now is not a game but a simulator manufactured for military use. Anybody else getting an Ender's Game vibe? Yushin is surprised, and she says more specifically, it is for that spark of power that he is using. In other words, it's a program to develop aura. He tells her to stop with the bullshit, saying even if it's for that kind of power, it is just an illusion inside a simulator. She asks what if that power can work in reality too. He says, no way, but she explains that the simulator makes it possible and that all over the world, they are currently trying to develop super soldiers with aura, and that is the purpose of real. However, branch manager Bernadotte and Hyungyu misused this technology, and there was a tip-off about an illegal supplier. That's why she joined the simulator to investigate this. He asks what she means, and she says it's too much for her to say, but she has a little stake in it inside the real simulator. He asks, leaving everything else aside, why he was invited. He's got nothing to do with any military test or illegal supplies. He's just an ordinary high school student with a TFT addiction, and he just wanted to play a more realistic VR game. She says that he was just another really unfortunate person. He was a random guy who got selected from numerous applicants and walked into this hell all by himself. He starts to bark at her, asking if he's really meant to buy that, and he tightens his grip on her throat. Maria realizes that he'll kill her if she doesn't say anything. Yushin controls himself. It jumps to a bit later, and she's yelling that she has no reason why he was chosen. Even if he twists her neck 100 times, her answer will still be the same. She's surprised and asks if he knew that, ignoring all the initial motives. This simulator right now has been turned into hell just to get rid of an existence called Yushin. He should keep that in mind. To accomplish that goal, the branch manager and Hyungyu are even willing to sell their souls to the devils. As Hyungyu and Bernadotte are having a meeting, Bernadotte says that he hopes his strategy for dealing with this problem will be successful. Hyungyu says he'll never disappoint him, but in reality, he's mentally boomed. One of his men from the NASA room call him, saying that this is bad. Hyungyu tells him to stop yapping and set up his link and upload the 9th special item. Now that it's come to this, he'll eliminate Yushin himself. He puts on the helmet, saying it's time to go deal with his own Frankenstein's monster. The guards quickly run in at the scream of Maria and kick the door down, asking what's going on. They see Yushin and ask what he is doing here. Maria looks back, and they realize who she is. They start to get funny ideas since she's the princess here. Yushin laughs, and Maria says that's who she is in this world, calling him a criminal bastard. The guards say that everyone is anxiously searching for their general, and they're glad to see him. Yushin asks why. We see on the castle walls all the soldiers are laughing, having fun, even though the war was not too long ago, and they're all relaxed, unlike the faces full of fear they held for so long until now. They look up to spot Yushin on the wall and yell out his name. Everybody turns, chanting that he defeated the messenger of death, Blackwen, and they start chanting General Lee over and over. Maria says it's no different from being an idol and calls him General as well. Yushin is just amazed as he looks down. She says that she's sorry to interrupt, but there is something he must know. If he wants to get out of this real simulator, The boss of the final stage, Blackwen, he needs to not just defeat him but completely decapitate him. Yushin grits his teeth, saying from the moment he was dragged here, that is the answer he's been searching for, as he's always wanted to know how to get out of here. Even though Hallenberg said he needed to fight Blackwen, and even Sepia said it as well, he can't believe the number of times he's heard it since the beginning. Off in the distance atop a cliff, we see somebody watching. Then it shows them going into a tent only to meet Blackwen, who asks if he's come here to fix his halberd, calling him the magician. The man says if the general requires it, rather than mending it, he can make a stronger one for him. However, the reason he came here late at night is to deliver the order from the second prince, and it's none other than Hyungyu. He says it's a brilliant plan, enough to give the general victory in this battle. Blackwen asks what he means, and Hyungyu says that he just needs to let his soldiers be the vanguard during tomorrow's battle. Back to the story, there was a girl that didn't return, and everybody said she's already dead. But somebody can still feel her far away on a battlefield somewhere else. They are certain that woman is still alive. And so the girl went to a land where endless blood is splattered and filled with nothing but screams. She left for the area solely for the promise of the day to reunite with the ring's owner, who promised to return. We hear Yushin's voice wondering if this is a dream or a hallucination as he sees Sepia, and he says that he's sure he's dreamt of this before. Then an explosion occurs right behind her, and he starts to flinch in real life. Right behind Sepia are weird knights, all donning these lance-type swords. She turns back around only to get impaled, and Yushin screams no. Waking up. Everybody else in the infirmary gets shocked, and Yushin crushes a table out of anger. He starts panting to calm himself down, and the nurse asks if he's okay. He wonders what that was, and he looks down at Sepia, saying it felt like she was right in front of him in his dream. Maria then knocks on the door, saying that she knows he's busy taking care of his dating activity and she's sorry to disturb him, but unidentified people have invaded the town at dawn today. Yushin's surprised, and we see those weird weapons from his dream along with all those weird soldiers too. Right behind them is Blackwen's army, as usual. They stand before the gates. One of Yushin's men says he expected them to storm in as soon as the sun came up, yet they are just standing far away. Yushin wonders if Blackwen's not going to advance today and what's the deal with the vanguard, as there are only 9 of them to begin with. Blackwen asks Hyungyu if he really believes that this many people will be enough to bring victory. Hyungyu says not just that, he'll definitely bring him the head of the descendant as well, as the moment he came here, failure was not an option. He sticks his hand out, telling his men to go forth. A purple light emits from their eyes, and they start to slowly march towards the gate. Then, immediately, they all begin running in a line one after another. Yushin's surprised, and Blackwen can notice this as well, they are actually quite skilled. They are moving in perfect formation, in sync to the point that their cloaks begin to meld with one another, creating the shape of something that Yushin's men say looks like a dragon. Maria is surprised, but the weird knights continue their march forward directly towards the castle gate. They all hold out their weapons, attacking it, blowing pieces of metal out the other side. Yushin's men shake from the rattle of the attack, but the knights don't stop as they repeat that movement over and over, repeatedly stabbing the gate. With each and every attack, the gate begins to break more and more until finally, they get a large chunk, crushing some men with the debris. Maria says that it's not a dragon, but a hydra, and each of its heads is a separate living entity. She adds that this is going to be quite difficult. They continue their onslaught to fully breach the gate, and they run out to reset the attack, only to turn back once more. Maria yells, telling everyone to prepare as it's coming again, and she instructs all the troops to go to the gate, warning that they'll be massacred if the gate fully collapses in this situation. The front of the pack of the weird knights charges forward, and Blackwen watches. Yushin puts his hand on the top of the castle, saying, 1 head or 100. Maria turns, and he continues, I just need to cut them all off, as he knocks a part of the wall off with his sheer strength, causing it to fall down. The men are surprised as Yushin instantly jumps off, following the debris. Maria says that for a commander to rush in without any plans is reckless, asking him what the hell he is doing. He puts his foot on the wall, pushing off of it to regain his stability, and then kicks the debris, launching it straight down toward the group. As it gets closer, we see it impact them, and it has killed their momentum for now, but it's enough time for Yushin to get close, and he's grinning. He comes down with his first swing, knocking the men back, but he doesn't plan to stop there. He immediately continues forward, cutting off the legs of one and slicing another one in half. He repeats this with each and every one of the Hydra's heads around 7 times, charging at another one in the back. This one readies himself to fight, but it's futile as he gets cut straight in half as well. But Yushin doesn't stop there, he then cuts the man's already dismembered body into even more pieces. Yushin stabs through the last one's chest and runs forward. Blackwen, Maria, and all the men watch in amazement. We see this all happen within the span of a couple of seconds. Yushin's men start to cheer him on, and Maria says that the Hydra is an existence that should not appear in this simulator in the first place, and she's sure that it's a special product that Hyung-yu has put in place to eliminate Yushin, who had unexpectedly awakened. She wonders what kind of battlefield he's been going through this entire time to get this strong. Blackwen approaches, asking Hyung-yu if this is the reason he asked for the vanguard position, to present the enemy with this view. Hyung-yu says, of course, that this is just the beginning. Blackwen starts to get annoyed, and Hyung-yu says from now on he will continue to present him with a real hell that will never end. All of the Hydra soldiers' corpses begin to reanimate themselves, regenerating with one another. Maria says this is the true nature of the Hydra. Yushin watches as their bodies begin to form back again, and Maria explains they don't reset, but they regenerate. Even the soldiers' bodies that were turned into mist are now back to being human. Yushin asks if he really had to bring zombies into this shit in the first place, and Blackwen smiles, saying it's an unbreakable puppet, and he's brought quite an interesting toy. One of the men's hair begins to get an orangish aura around it, and he explodes forward, charging at Yushin. Maria recognizes his face, saying, there is no way, and as Yushin goes to block the attack, she tells him that he can't. If she's not mistaken, no matter how strong he's become, he can never win against them. As Yushin collides blow for blow with the man, regardless of her warning, Hyung-yu says even if he does find out, the fact that this is the end for Yushin remains unchanged. As Yushin and the man are now face to face with one another, Yushin swings as hard as he can, yet again cutting the man clean in half. Another one to his left also catches a stray, and when Yushin glances over, he spots the man's body regenerating instantly, only for the rest to charge directly at him. He begins to raise his leg to avoid one of the attacks and then blocks another with his sword. He then swaps grips in his hand, going for a counterattack, parrying their synced movement. But he continues pushing forward, killing 4 of them immediately. His men start to cheer him on, but as we already know, it's futile as they begin to regenerate. This time, Yushin has suffered some heavy damage and begins to spit out blood. Blackwen and his men watch in silence as the Hydra continuously gets chopped in half by Yushin, one after another, only to regenerate to repeat their formation, eventually impaling Yushin directly through his stomach with one of their weapons. The Hydra, continuing their synced movement, fully wraps around his body, and once the smoke settles, we see he is impaled with 9 lances. It is now his 613th life. He had quite a lot of lives taken from when he fought Blackwen. Maria reminds him that these are not mere copies of the same level as the NPCs he has fought so far. Yushin asks what he needs to do then, and she says that according to the rumors circulating in the village, they are immortal soldiers, and she was really surprised. She still can't believe that Hyung-yu and the branch manager created a monster like this. Moreover, the face of one of the men is that of someone who went missing in the past, the genius knight Arslan. Another one is named Medici, Voltek, and Kundo. All 9 of them went missing in the past. She was too lazy to mention the other 5. They are rankers who were called geniuses. I am not going to remember their names, do not expect as such, she says even if he is a 3rd-ranked knight, it is impossible for him to fight them alone. He sighs, saying, if not him, who else will stop them? She is surprised, but his men realize he is right, because both she and the soldiers all froze in fear. And that this is absurd. Yushin begins to walk towards them again, and she says that really is the case. Even though it is reckless and embarrassing, the only one they can rely on is Yushin, as he is their final hope. And that she needs to support him. Maria pulls something out, telling Yushin to take it. He asks why he needs a pendant, and we see it's a small blue orb. She says it's more than that, something that she's been saving up for 7 years to use in an emergency. It is called an aura crystal. He asks why she would give something so important, and she responds that it's meant to be used at a time like this. This is a desperate situation because if he falls, so will she, and since she's got no choice, she'll give it everything she's got and rely on him. He's surprised by this, saying that for someone to be like that in this place, he thought Sepia was the only one. He smiles, saying that this means he's not alone yet. He takes her aura pendant and runs straight off the castle. The Hydra begins their onslaught onto the gate again, but Yushin stands before them, this time full of resolve. All 9 of the Hydra realize he's their target and begin to charge forward. While holding onto the aura pendant, he He says it feels so vivid. The wave of strength squirming inside it has a strong will. Maria watches in anticipation, and Yushin says that's right. Though not as much as him, she must have also been really desperate to survive this situation. He throws the pendant directly towards the Hydra, saying that's why he'll no longer wait for something to happen. He starts to run toward them. The pendant gets closer to them, and right before they're about to collide with one another, Yushin cracks the aura pendant with his sword, yelling, not to get in his way anymore. There's a massive sound, something akin to the sound barrier being broken, as Yushin swings his sword down straight in front of them. Maria watches in surprise, but Blackwen keeps his emotions in check. Even Hyungyu lets out an audible gasp as the Hydra gets immediately one-shotted, and they begin to reform. Yushin says even if it's like this, it does not matter as he starts to swing, cutting even their blood, asking if they'll still regenerate even after this. He unleashes yet another shockwave attack, turning the ones who did regenerate back into mist, and he repeats this over and over until the blood turns into literal dust in the air. Hyungyu says even the unmatched product that he's created has been turned into red mist, and he can't believe that the data was destroyed beyond repair. Yushin raises his sword into the air once more, and Hyungyu gets pissed, asking how dare he push him to this point. He taps onto his ring, beginning to fade out, saying that he will definitely get his revenge as he vanishes from where he's standing, teleporting somewhere else. He smirks, looking down at Sepia, who is still comatose in her bed. The nurse asks who he is, dropping her things, and he dismissively calls her an insect-like NPC and tells her to leave him alone. He begins to gather a purple aura in his hand. Outside, Yushin's men are all screaming, saying that General Lee has defeated the dragon. Maria says even if he did have half her pendant, he is a monster, and Yushin stands there, ready for what's to come next. Then he realizes something, as does Maria. Then the soldiers run in, saying that inside the infirmary, there has been an ambush. We see the nurse's head get sent flying through the air. The door gets kicked down, and Yushin runs in only to see blood, calling out for Sepia. He is then surprised to see Hyungyu holding her hostage, who says it's been some time and that he'll be taking her with him. Of course, he can't promise that he'll just give her back and leave quietly. Out of pure anger, Yushin screams Hyungyu's name and runs in due to his rage, trying to swing down at him, only to hit the air as Hyungyu has already vanished behind him. Yushin starts to blame himself, asking what was the point of getting so strong if he's an idiot who can't even keep his precious someone from being taken away right in front of him. Maria asks if that night is really that precious to him, and he gives her a death glare. She asks if it's really enough for him to rush into the midst of enemies, even if it means that he has to risk his life walking into a trap with no more outs. We see Hyungyu raising his foot into the air, kicking Sepia in the stomach while laughing, and she finally wakes up. Hyungyu asks, "What the hell is your identity? Are you a hacker or an irregular?" She screams, asking him what he's so afraid of, questioning if a superior shouldn't act with confidence. She asks him again what he's so scared of, suggesting that maybe his superiors on the outside have a tight hold on his lifeline. He's taken aback, asking how she knows this and wonders just how much more she knows. She taunts him, saying, "Maybe you're afraid that person will show up here." He yells, calling her an arrogant bitch, and demands to know why she thinks he'd be scared, dismissing it as wishful thinking. He declares that the moment Yushin steps in to save her, he'll make sure that neither of them can be found in any corner of this world. They are inside a tent, heavily guarded by enemy soldiers on all sides, waiting to ambush. Hyungyu says there's not much time left. The 1000th scenario, the restart number that no user has ever been able to reach, is approaching. Once Yushin walks into this trap, he won't be able to resist death. Hyungyu begins choking Sepia. Meanwhile, Yushin stands there in the infirmary. Maria tells him that even though he knows it's a trap, she understands that he's still going to go in. One of the soldiers adds that if that's his will, they'll follow him, hoping that Yushin can lead them on a path they can also walk. Yushin is surprised and realizes they are sincere, saying it would be a path with no return. All the soldiers look worried, and he asks if they would still follow even if that's the case. They respond that, in the first place, they'd have long been dead if it hadn't been for Yushin. The soldiers start to scream, saying they want to tell their wives, children, and the people they promised to marry that they fought very hard until the end, for the sake of returning. Yushin reflects, saying all this time, he thought he was the only one fighting this way. He can't believe all these people, whom he ignored because they were just NPCs, felt the same. Maria speaks up, saying that she knows Hyungyu better than anyone else, and she's sure she knows exactly where he is hiding. She explains that after they break in and divert his attention, Yushin needs to save Sepia and come out as quickly as he can. He's surprised that she's willing to come along. She admits she's not sure why, but if he were to disappear right now, it would cause everything, not just the castle, to collapse. Yushin loosens his cape, throwing it into the air, and tells everyone, it's time to go. Back to Sepia, the enemy soldiers ask each other if they really think the enemy's general will come to save a useless girl. Yushin's cape now has a lot of writing on it, and we see him riding directly beneath it. The enemy soldiers spot him, and they yell as they come flying on horseback. One of the men lifts Sepia's chin, saying this will be the last day she'll see Yushin. We see he's even riding his father's horse, charging straight in. Inside Blackwen's tent, Blackwen turns, sensing Yushin's aura, and smiles, saying, he's actually here now. Yushin bursts through the first defensive line, and all the enemies lying in wait yell that the descendant has appeared and that the defense unit needs to move forward. But as soon as they do, they are instantly attacked and obliterated. Inside Sepia's tent, the guards ask what all the commotion is about, while we see Sepia sitting there. The story we've heard so far continues. Finally, the girl passes through that hellish battlefield and arrived at a village, only to fall over and see a wagon. And there, she happened to meet a resident. She raises her head, and we see Yushin, crying, asking, who are you? We learn that she was the one who knew him, but he was a boy who couldn't even remember his own identity. She begins to cry in reality as well, and the enemy soldiers ask if she's worried that the descendant is going to die. Suddenly, the tent is cut open, and they turn to see Yushin standing there, as he was the one who cut it open. The soldiers are caught up in the attack and get killed. Yushin screams out her name, and she begins to cry as we learn that he was the one who could no longer remember her name. We learn more about the story. In the midst of a battle, a boy was summoned to the emperor's castle for an unknown reason. The queen told him that from now on, he would be the lord of the castle. The boy was shocked, as what awaited him was a cold-hearted lady and the corpse of an emperor who had the same face as him. The queen warned him that if he didn't take the role, the one he cherished would be killed in his stead, asking him what he planned to choose. He was stunned, but he knew it was something he couldn't reject, a very arrogant proposal. Holding back his frustration, he said he would become the emperor. However, before that, he had one last request. He showed a ring, asking that it be delivered to that girl, and with it, an obviously broken farewell. As he began to cry, his tears fell onto the ring. An older lady placed her hand on his head, saying, don't be too sad, because once your memory disappears, the gnawing pain you're experiencing shall wither away. A blue aura emanated from her hand, and just like that, the boy forgot. That's why he's asking Sepia who she is, and why he's crying at the sight of her, even though he no longer remembers her. He became the emperor, and the flashback ends with him cutting the tent, just like we saw earlier, and him screaming Sepia's name. She starts to cry, and he quickly cuts the rope, freeing her. Right before she falls, he catches her, asking if she's okay or if she's hurt anywhere. Back to story time, we learn that even if he couldn't remember her, the girl decided to protect the boy by staying with him. When she was a beggar on the streets, she had found a sword and practiced swinging it. Minutes turned into hours, hours turned into months, months turned into years. The doors opened up, and Yushin looked over to see Sepia as the female knight. That's how she became the emperor's escort knight. We see him smiling, and as time went by, amidst those days that seemed to continue forever, a black beast invaded. Everything fell under its claws, and in the end, it took down a man as strong as a god. With it, the boy's heartbeat gradually slowed, his body grew limp and cold as if he had never been alive, as if his soul had vanished, and the girl's tears flowed non-stop. She then hears an old lady telling her not to worry, and she turns with tears in her eyes to look at her. It's the same lady who wiped Yushin's memories. The old lady tells her there's still one method left to save that boy. Sepia is surprised, asking what it is. The old lady slams her staff into the ground, and an orb appears around Yushin and Sepia with a magic circle beneath it. She says he needs to forget everything here and live a new life in another world. His body begins to float up into the air, and Sepia asks if she can go with him. The old lady looks at her, saying they'll give her a single chance. In the world that he ends up in, the moment this child encounters danger, just once, they'll allow her to protect him by his side beyond the world's barrier. Sepia smiled upon hearing this and thanked the lady. Just like that, Yushin vanished. Who would have guessed this was an isekai absolutely wild? But for Sepia, that alone was enough. We see the old lady with a complex expression on her face. Back in the real world, A limousine door opens, and an old lady steps out. Men bow to greet her, the same lady we saw previously. She enters Elog Korea's building, only to see all the security guards on the floor, and her men bowing to greet her. She comments, "That means he did a lot of bad things." We then see Bernadotte running to the elevator, and she calls out to him, "You idiot." He turns in shock, asking the fourth elder how she got there. She glares at him, telling her men, "Take him away." He yells, insisting she needs to hear him out and that whatever rumor she's heard, she should let him explain. He screams her name as loudly as he can. She says, "Now, it's time to find Hyungyu. Where's that little mouse hiding?" One of her bodyguards replies, saying, "Just as you predicted, he's currently in the simulator." She says, "Let's hurry up, so my children can stop crying." Yushin puts his cape around her, saying that she must be tired and they need to leave quickly, as their army is waiting for them. She says that for the general to finally have an army of his own, she is really glad. He says that she's right. Apart from Sepia, he always had people abandon him. Now he has people who believe in him, and they entered this deadly place with him. He yells, saying they need to return back home, without leaving a single person behind, and he'll bring everyone back. He tells everybody to hurry up as they need to go to the fortress. The soldiers then tell him that only he needs to leave. They say at least he can return to his home, as they immediately get impaled, ending their lives by the enemy soldiers. Yushin wanted to bring everybody, but we see that Blackwen's army is already ready. They even have spears around Maria's throat. Hyungyu laughs, asking if they were trying to feign an attack by using this paper-like army. Maria clicks her tongue, and off in the distance, Blackwen sits there, watching. And with that, once again, the black beast found the boy and the girl. He slowly rides his horse up to Yushin. Blackwen says if only he hadn't come here, at least there would be more people alive tonight, and that it's such a shame that his men had to die such a dog's death. Maria says that the reason he is called the Lion of Nemea was not just because of his immense strength, but also due to his exceptional resourcefulness. After giving his all in the battle against the Hydras, to him who is holding on because of his willpower, those words of Blackwen blaming him for his subordinate's death will become a crushing weight to him as Blackwen jumps off of his horse, landing in front of Yushin. If the two of them fight in this situation, Maria says no matter how many times this loop repeats, Yushin will just keep dying. Sepia asks Yushin if the weight of their lives is too heavy for him, and he turns, surprised. She asks if it's that, or is it the wishes that they wanted to fulfill through him. He starts to think about how they all told him they were willing to die for this mission, and he says that he's afraid so. She puts her hand on his blade, saying if he can feel the weight of all their wishes, she squeezes onto it, cutting herself, and he asks what she's doing. She takes the blood and begins to draw onto his cape, adding even more symbols that were already on it. She says, including this heart of hers, rather than a burden on his shoulders, they would rather be a pair of wings for him so he can carry himself out of this. Maria is surprised, saying in this moment, which may be the last, how can she appear so calm in front of Yushin? Yushin thinks about what she means by a wing instead of a burden, and she nods her head. Then he finally realizes what was written on his cape, which were the names of all the soldiers. Yushin realizes that he still has them with him, and he smiles. Blackwen wonders why he's smiling in this situation, and Sepia puts her hand on his face, saying now he needs to ride on this hope and fly. She calls him her precious someone before losing strength in her legs and falls to the ground. Yushin screams out her name and tells her she can stop talking, and we see her gassed out. He says he understands what she is saying. He stands back up to face Blackwen, who wonders what the hell is going on, because Yushin has no hostility or even aura, and he's just walking towards him. Blackwen begins to sweat nervously because he's never seen this before. Yushin's face still looks extremely calm as he glares at Blackwen. Blackwen just wonders what the hell Yushin is up to but thinks that since Yushin is alone, as soon as he takes his head off, this tiresome war will be over. He readies his axe and charges straight forward at Yushin, shattering the ground beneath him. Letting out a roar, he goes for an attack, but Yushin remains calm. Hyungyu laughs, saying this is the moment for Yushin to die. Back in reality, we hear a gunshot, and we see people shot on the floor. It's the fourth Elder's guards who announce that from this moment forth, Elog Korea's access privilege to the simulator will be rescinded. Everyone in the control room will be detained until disciplinary action is decided. The old lady enters the room, and they all turn to greet her. She asks about the current situation inside the simulation. They respond, saying that unfortunately, it looks like a concerning situation did occur after all. She can't believe it happened to those children, and thinks fate has been too cruel to them, wondering why Sepia always gets the short end of the stick. Blackwen swings his axe straight down at Yushin, who blocks it with his blade. Despite everything, Yushin's facial expression remains unwavering. Blackwen is shocked, as Yushin blocked his attack without even using aura. Hyungyu asks how this is possible, and even Maria is surprised. She wonders how Yushin, even if he's a third-rank knight, could block such a strike like it was nothing. She wonders what the hell is up with Yushin. Even Yushin doesn't understand what's happening. He says he doesn't feel any weight from his sword or from Blackwen's attack, and that this sensation is unlike anything he's ever felt before. Blackwen yells, asking what kind of tricks Yushin is playing, and swings again. This time, Yushin retaliates with his own swing. Blackwen realizes he needs to block it and barely manages to do so, but he's still launched backward. He manages to stay upright by stabbing his axe into the ground, halting his momentum. Blackwen shouts at Yushin, telling him not to be dumb and to bring out his aura, then charges straight back in. He takes another full swing at Yushin, slicing straight through him, but it turns out to be only an afterimage, as Yushin is calmly walking forward just like before. Blackwen realizes this is bad, grits his teeth, and begins to imbue even more aura into his axe, swinging it around. Yet again, all he cuts is nothing but an afterimage. Panicking, Blackwen unleashes a flurry of attacks, then slams his axe into the ground, since he thinks getting him off the ground would work. Yushin jumps into the air and gets slashed at again as Blackwen yells, but it's futile, the thing he cut has just missed again. Blackwen continues to push forward, wondering what's happening. He can't even touch a piece of Yushin's armor with his swings. Yushin says it's his turn to ask questions and asks Blackwen what exactly aura is. Blackwen is stunned as Yushin appears right in his face. Then, realizing that it's about to be over, Yushin finally uses his aura and swings his sword at Blackwen. The attack doesn't kill Blackwen but instead sends him flying, hurting his internals. He stands back up and curses at Yushin, who kind of fades out just like the Hydra did. Blackwen looks around in a panic and feels aura behind him and he swings saying, "There he is." But as soon as he does, he instead just takes out some of his army, sending them flying. Yushin asks, is aura the power to dominate others? Since he's right in his face, Blackwen gets flustered and swings straight down at Yushin. Yushin easily avoids it, saying, if not that, then what? Yushin instantly gets behind Blackwen, and when Blackwen turns, Yushin swings his sword upwards, raising it into the air for what's to come next, as he swings straight down, hitting Blackwen. Yushin asks, maybe it's an otherworldly sensation arising from the depths of consciousness to help confront a formidable foe? Blackwen lets out a scream, and we see that he actually got heavily injured from this attack and begins to bleed like crazy, as this is the first time we've ever seen Blackwen so far get injured. Everybody is surprised, even Maria, as she wonders what is going on because if Yushin goes beyond that limit, he may never be able to return back home. Sepia's eyes look proud, and Hyungyu screams, telling Blackwen to get up, saying, even if he's just a copy, he can't die in vain like this, and grits his teeth saying, he has to get up now, even if he risks his life, he must kill Yushin. Blackwen looks back up at Yushin with his stoic expression and wonders why he can't win and why he's losing to a mere child. Yushin says, this power that we're using is something that's impossible for ordinary soldiers and knights to even think of facing. Blackwen asks, what does this have to do with anything? Yushin replies, they overcame the dread of facing such an overwhelming and absolute power, and the precious lives which should have returned to their families and embrace were instead entrusted to me before they finally disappeared. He truly saw that their willingness to die for a cause and their unwavering resolve is what's supporting him from behind, as he is not alone in this fight. Blackwen realizes what he means now, and Yushin points his sword into the air, saying, that's why, whether it's aura or another strong power, it doesn't matter anymore. Yushin raises his sword in the air, and we see an orangish aura this time. He says to Blackwen, what matters here is that I will kill you and then return home since that is the only thing I can do for those fallen soldiers. Blackwen struggles to stand up, and Yushin begins to run forward, saying, with everybody back home and with those following me, I will end it here. Blackwen raises his axe high into the air, slamming it down into the ground, causing a giant explosion to erupt right beneath his feet. It gets very bright for a second, and then looks as if the shockwave from the attack is creating some kind of wall that Yushin can't surpass, and he says, he can't reach him. Blackwen begins to pump every ounce of aura he has into his axe, and the aura begins to condense more and more, and the ground begins to shake as he lets out a primal roar. We learn that it's the attributes of his armor that allows him to have cohesion amplification and explosive strengthening of aura. As he keeps imbuing aura into his axe, we see it beginning to crack and slowly start to break into pieces, changing shape. He yells, "I am going to take Yushin down with me today, even if this is the last thing I do." Just the shockwave of his aura causes Maria and the other soldiers to panic, but Sepia doesn't move at all. Yushin grits his teeth knowing what's to come, as he sat there and let him charge for an entire chapter of monologuing. The bright light is seen from the NASA area. One of the elders' men says that they need to find a way to stop the simulator. She says they shouldn't do anything. If they meddle hastily when everything is already overloaded, then that child's life would only be in more danger. As we see Yushin laying in a capsule, she says the only thing they can do now is to keep watching, and that she hopes with his own strength he can walk out of this hell. Yushin continues trying his best to walk forward towards Blackwen, and Maria stretches her hand out telling him to wait. Sepia is still unwavering. Yushin says that he can't go any deeper because there's too much heat to pass through. Blackwen yells, saying with this he will finally end the descendant of the Reaper. Hyungyu is fine because he has a magic shield protecting him, and he goes to touch his ring saying, "To this moment of death where everything is perishing, I will adjust the reset time, and within this brutal raging blaze without leaving a single bit of his heart behind, everything will burn away." Some Shakespeare type shit. As the flames begin to get even hotter than before, turning a purplish color, Yushin begins to get sucked into them. We see in real life he is convulsing in pain and he is even asking why he thinks it will end just like this. He is now in his 756th loop, and no matter how many times he keeps burning, no matter how many times he dies, as he has jumped up to the 795s, even passing the 800s now, he says it does not matter even if he were to burn for all eternity, as he is now passing the 900s, the 980s. Blackwen is still smiling in every single loop, and Yushin says he will never be able to break inside. He dies again for his 997th time. He says he will not be turned to ashes as we see his cape beginning to get singed as well. He is finally on his 999th attempt, and he says he can hold on proudly because of the wings that everybody entrusted to him. The people at NASA wonder what the hell is happening. As we see Yushin unleashing an even darker, deeper blue aura than before, and he is standing within the flames pushing them back. This is now his 1000th life. He begins to float into the air as his aura creates a weird figure behind him, and the men realize that this is the appearance of the 8th apostle. The collision from Yushin's aura and Blackwen's begin to shake the area, and the elder says it finally has ended, and she calls Yushin a poor child, as he has finally made his way through the flames charging directly towards Blackwen. His aura completely enveloping Blackwen's wrapping around it, and everybody watches surprised as the fiery wall that Blackwen had put up is now orbiting around Yushin and him. Maria begins to cry telling Yushin to stop, saying if he goes any further he won't be able to return. Of course, Sepia still is not changing her facial expression, but in Yushin's eyes he is fully determined to end this battle here. He begins to fight with Blackwen inside of the aura. They begin trading blow for blow with one another, and Hyungyu's ring cracks. He screams looking down at it, and he says he can't believe a high school kid has ruined his plans like this and he has become the 8th apostle. He screams out Yushin's name as loud as he can. In reality, somebody's capsule breaks open, and we see that it is none other than Yushin's as he is levitating in real life. He is now following the movements of him in the other world one-to-one. Even after everything so far, Blackwen still has not backed down and is trying to unleash even more power to combat Yushin's. Yushin raises his fist saying, "With this, it is the end, Blackwen." We see an overlap of him in real life and in the other world as he thrusts his sword forward with all of his might, shattering Blackwen's armor. Blackwen's insides begin to get torn apart, and he lets out a primal scream as we see Yushin's attack was extremely effective, creating a giant explosion that condenses into a nice spherical white light. Shattering outward, Maria and the other soldiers hold themselves up from the shockwave of the attack. The worst is that Blackwen's soldiers are getting absolutely obliterated from the collision of the attack. Hyungyu says he should have never entered here in the first place and he needs to get out of the simulator. We hear the old lady saying, "It's better that you don't even dream about it," calling him by his full name. He asks her how she entered the simulator, and she says she is here because of those baseless rumors, and that everything was done on Bernadotte's orders. She puts her finger on his forehead and says she couldn't bear listening to any more of this rat bastard's cries. A hole appears in Hyungyu's head, and his eyes begin to tear up as his body begins to eat away at itself, pretty much deleting him, turning him into mist in the air. In real life, his helmet is now soaked in blood, and he disintegrates as well. The shockwaves begin to calm down a bit, and Maria turns asking how Yushin is doing, as we see him standing there still releasing all of his aura, and she is just glad that he is alive. But we don't get a good look at his face. The fourth elder says that there isn't much time before his body collapses, and Maria shouts to her. Yushin begins to bleed all over, and Maria says that since she is here she needs to quickly save him, and it should still be possible as he hasn't hit the 1000th death yet. Even if she needs to seal his death, she begs him. The fourth elder says that if she sincerely wishes to protect somebody, she needs to grow stronger instead of crying just like that child. When Maria glances over, we see Sepia walking towards Yushin. The fourth elder says that even if her entire body is torn apart and broken, those steps will continue moving towards Yushin as that is all she cares for. Yushin opens his eyes widely, then glances over saying somebody is coming, and we see him in a wheat field asking why this place is so familiar. He says that there is somebody always waiting for him here, and it is none other than Sepia. He smiles telling her that he is back, and he says her name, and he actually does snap out of it as he is now back to real life. Sepia stretches her hands out as the aftermath of the shock waves from the attack are still going off, and we see both him and her catching strays one after another. He grabs onto her and she puts her hands on his head and says once again she wishes to protect him and turns towards the elder. The elder looks down at her with nothing but pity saying that surely she knows there is a price for a miracle. The elder says to seal a death is quite a heavy price to pay. Sepia says she doesn't care about the price and if she can be wherever he is, that is all that she wants. The fourth elder says that it means all of his memories here will be sealed and that includes his memories of her. She says that it does not matter as once again fate will bring them together. Maria watches, and the elder says she understands and not to cry to Sepia. The aura finally begins to dissipate, and the battlefield is eerily quiet as the simulator has now officially come to an end, as we see both Yushin and Sepia's swords on the ground. We see a bright light as Yushin opens his eyes saying that it's snowing, looking outside. He says 1 month ago he got into an accident on his way home from the school vacation ceremony, and it was snowing a lot on that day too. That's what his parents and doctor told him. He was unconscious for this whole month, and he has lost his memories. However, his muscles are extremely big compared to what they were before, and his hands are extremely rough and full of calluses. He wonders if he was really just lying here in wait. We see Sepia looking up at his window, and Yushin is also looking down, surprised. She smiles at him and he begins running down, saying perhaps that girl will know something. We see her heading to a car, and as he is making his way downstairs, the car door closes, and she starts to drive away. Yushin rushes outside and looks worried. The fourth elder asks Sepia if it would be okay to part like this because after this she might never see him again. Sepia says they'll meet again someday, so she is fine with it. The fourth elder smiles, and Sepia says they've already promised to meet one another once again. Yushin looks over at the tree she was at, seeing a ring, and when he reaches onto it, he instantly remembers everything saying, from now on and always, I'll be her knight under heart, saying her name. Sepia smiles and we see them standing with one another in a wheat field, and Yushin says he can't believe he forgot her and he knows that no matter what, they'll meet each other again someday. How did you guys feel about the ending of this? I felt like it was missing a lot, and that's because it is. There are way more chapters in the light novel. For any of you light novel readers, please spoil me in the comments. I wish the fight scenes were more fleshed out, and we got to learn more about the apostles and whatnot. Still, I quite enjoyed this series and hope you did too. This was for my 100k special. If you've watched till the end, comment, Brazil, to let me know. Subscribe for more videos like this, leave a like or a comment to help the channel out. Thanks for watching.